Are you good to go?
Kurt, you ready?
All set.
Cool, he's always prepared. All right. Do you want to do the preamble first?
Yes. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight for our MMTC meeting here. We have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to staff. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send us a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And yep, turn it back over to you.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to the November 6th edition of the MMTC monthly meeting. As always, we start with our 5 o'clock study session. And this one in particular is going to be going over the first public draft, I think, of the Climate Action Plan, which Damon has been sitting on the steering committee of for a while now. And it's here for our review. So hopefully you guys got a chance to read it at least a little bit and come prepared with discussion questions. But I have a feeling Jamie's probably going to lead us through it first, right?
That's right. Yep.
Cool.
They're at least the mobility section. I'm going to give some background and then get into the section that interests you guys the most, I think.
Okay. Should we do quick introductions, or do you just want to jump right
that
in?
would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Just in case you don't know who anybody is. So I'm Nick Kuzmyak. I'm the chair of MMTC. Been on the board for, I don't remember, 4 years maybe? 5? I don't know. And chair most of the time, it seems. So that's it, I guess. Damon?
Hi, Dave.
I've been on this commission since maybe late 2019. Or no. I was gonna say no. A couple years.
Couple of years. Okay, yeah.
I'm Sean. I've been on this committee for 6 months.
Okay,
I'm still learning.
great.
So,
Nice to meet you.
I'm MSO admin.
Okay,
I'm Pat Collette, and I've been on the commission for about 2.5 years.
great. Nice to meet you.
I'm Ed Adlott, and I've been on here for about 4 months.
All right, great.
Hey, I'm Jake Baldwin. I'm an engineer with the city.
All right, nice.
And Dave Cronin, staff liaison.
Great, nice to meet all of you guys. You want to say your name?
I'm Kathy Richardson. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the City of Lawrence.
and you're director for the county then, right?
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Hoffling, and I work as the Sustainability Impact Analyst for the Douglas County Sustainability Office.
Okay, cool. Thanks for coming
Yeah.
here, and looking forward to seeing what is going on with the draft
Yeah.
and how we
all
can
right.
help.
Good. All right, so I'm going to go up to the podium so that I can
Okay.
run through the plan. And the mic it just automatically start working. Okay, all right. It's actually my first time getting to make a presentation in here, so at least in a while. All right, so I want to start by just giving a tiny bit of background about sustainability, about the Sustainability Office. Back when we first started working on the Climate Action Plan, we were a joint office, so we were both Douglas County and City of Lawrence Sustainability. And since then, we did have a split, a very cordial split. It was just for, something that's been happening and kind of across joint offices within Douglas County and the City of Lawrence. So nothing really out of the ordinary about that. And we've been working together since then as well. I wish I could still see everybody. I'm so short that.
You can lower the podium.
There's a down arrow button. Hold it in. It should start going down.
It is going down. There we go.
Sit stand.
It's not getting caught. Okay. Great. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. So, yeah, and you guys all got to meet Kathy if you didn't already know her. Our offices work very closely together on all kinds of programs, including Common Ground, the Community Garden Program, if you guys are familiar with that. And the Climate Action Plan is another example of our unified programs that have continued since the split. And that happened in 2022, so that was last August of 2022. And then our office was directed to write a climate action plan from Plan 2040. And I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with Plan 2040. And then there was also a regional climate action plan that was written for the Kansas City region. And they did include Douglas County and Lawrence in that plan as well. So there was a climate vulnerability assessment that was done that includes our region, or includes our city and our office, and kind of help set the stage for climate action to take place. 2040 not only asked for a climate action plan, but also adaptation. So asked us to look at mitigating greenhouse gas emissions in Lawrence and Douglas County, but also adapting to it at the same time. So adapting to the changes that we're seeing with climate change. So to kind of set a little bit more of the stage of the climate action plan, or the climate action adaptation plan that we're now calling ADAPT Douglas County, we did a lot of a community outreach before we ever even put pen to paper. So we didn't start writing the plan until much later. First, we started by doing focus groups and interviews with the community to really find out how are people being impacted on a daily basis right now. What are people thinking about climate change? Where are their minds? What do they want to really see come of a plan like this? So we started there, and then we went back and started doing a greenhouse gas inventory, so we could find out what our actual emissions were. We wanted to know what is our community putting out in the atmosphere that's contributing to climate change. So those two components were brought together to write the strategies and the goals for this plan. And we have obviously a steering and staff committee, and Damon serves on the steering committee. I did want to give you a chance, Damon, to say a little something about your involvement in the steering committee, if you don't mind.
Yeah. It was set up, we met monthly usually. We were presented kind of like the latest and greatest, and we'd have an opportunity to, give live thoughts and feedback and questions. And then Amy also set up a Google Doc, which is a way for us to, once we had a draft going, a way to interact with it and provide feedback that way, which I thought was great. As someone who needs a little bit more time to read and digest and give thought to my feedback, I thought that was really helpful. And then we had a couple of live meetings too, a great one at Lawrence Public Library. We're kind of broken into small groups and really just kind of interrogated the goals and the strategies to try and just boil them down to as concise and potent as possible. But yeah, now I'm really happy to bring it to the full MMTC table, because it's hard to represent the whole commission when it's just me, on there. So I'm happy to get you guys' feedback here now. Is that it?
Great, thank you. Yeah, and there were a lot of meetings like that, like what Damon's talking about, where there were a lot of discussion about how can we align with other goals and other plans that are out there in the county and the city. I keep mentioning the county because it's really important to keep in mind that this is not just a City of Lawrence plan, that this is meant to be countywide. So we're trying to reflect all the voices and all of the different perspectives across the county. So that includes Lecompton, Eudora, Baldwin City, and the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. And we did that through those staff meetings, through the steering committee, and also the focus groups that we hosted across the county. So we had those in those respective cities so that we could really hear those individual voices and the collective voices to make sure that we could reflect them as much as possible in the plan. So how many of you guys have had a chance to really look at a little bit of the plan, just to kind of see what's there? Yeah, Nick, you've looked at it? Okay. And does everybody have it up on, I've got it here on the screen. I'm going to pull it up here. Here in just a second. There we go. And I'm going to attempt to orient you guys in the plan so that you know kind of what you're looking at, and then see how you guys want to be involved in it. Obviously, your feedback, just reviewing it and giving feedback on what you see in the plan is great. But if you wanted to help with outreach, we can also work on that as well. We've got several open houses scheduled for this month of November during this public outreach session, or this public outreach period. Okay, and yeah.
Share your Zoom screen, please.
Yes.
Green button at the bottom.
There we go.
Perfect.
There we go. Thank you. All right. Okay, so when you open the draft up, this is the first page that you see. It's a welcome. It talks a little bit about what informed the plan, the things that I've mentioned, the staff, the steering, the focus groups, and the interviews. I didn't mention a survey, but there was a community survey that was also done that we got 544 results on. There were other community climate plans that were consulted with, so we looked at a lot of different climate plans that are out there, as well as as many as possible from the county and the city. And then if you scroll down, you guys are welcome to use this feature here, the QR code that's on the screen. You can use that to provide feedback. You can also just email me directly if you'd like, whatever works best for you. And also, if you're sharing this draft with others, you can encourage them to use the survey. This is the table of contents. I'm not going to go into a changing climate. That really sets the whole background about what climate change is. I'm going to assume that a lot of you guys probably or maybe everybody knows what climate change is. The local impacts are largely a reference from the climate vulnerability assessment that I mentioned earlier that's done by the region. So that when you get into that, you can see a little bit more in detail of what we were looking at, what we're trying to address. But I wanted to draw your attention to the greenhouse gas inventory and targets. I'm going to scroll down here for a second. Okay. I wanted to point this out because I know all of you are working in transportation, and just to point out that 27% of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from the transportation sector. So there's a lot of opportunity there to curb our greenhouse gas emissions and really look at strategies that will help mitigate climate change, but also adapt to it.
Another question on this.
Yeah.
One. So I only very recently learned about the distinction between, I think it's through the EPA, there's like scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, like the different ways that you can emit. So one is like obviously direct emissions of gas, whether it be carbon dioxide from exhaust, methane from leaks, stuff that you can easily measure, well, sort of. And then scope 2 is like electricity, right? And maybe some other stuff too, but it's like, it's emissions, but you don't see the emissions. They happen somewhere else. And then there's scope 3, which is like chemicals and transportation. And that's usually, we're not quite there. It seems like in most life cycle assessments, but does this include scope 2 stuff, or is it just?
This is scope 1, yeah. Okay. So we do have a power plant right here in Lawrence, and we didn't look at everything that they produce. Instead, we looked at what was consumed. So it would be scope 1. Yeah, everything consumed on residential energy, commercial energy. We did have fugitive emissions, which would be those leaks that you're talking about. But yeah, as much as we could measure in scope 1.
Wait, so if there was electricity used that was produced at the Evergy plant, then that was counted then?
Right, counted by consumption. Mm-hmm.
Okay, for some reason I thought that was scope 2, so that's still scope 1, just any energy.
I believe so. I guess I'm not an expert on that, but yeah, I know there was a difference between production and consumption, so I thought that's maybe what you're referring to.
I don't know. I don't know all the lingo just yet. So.
Yeah, that's okay. So we were only looking at consumption, energy that was used.
Okay, so like if the Evergy plant produced something that was sent to Kansas City, not our stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Even though those emissions are here in our community. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right.
And we're trying to look at what levers we can pull here. What can we actually do as a community? And we can't obviously do as much in Kansas City. We can try to advocate for cleaner energy at the state level, but primarily we're looking at what we can do as a local government. Mm-hmm. And that's what we measured. And you can see a little bit more of that detail here. Oh, I forgot to mention that we did a baseline of 2021. That's the year that we used for measuring those emissions. So if you you can look down at the breakdown of each of these different sectors that we measured. And then we take out forest and trees. Right now, Douglas County has about 20% tree coverage. And that's forests and trees. So that's individual trees, and that's a collection. The forest is referring to a collection of trees. And we can actually reduce our emissions, obviously, by sequestering that carbon through those forests and trees. So trees take in that carbon just through photosynthesis, a very natural process that happens. And so we can reduce our emissions by almost 10%, or actually a little bit more than 10%, 151,000 of our emissions.
Is there any way to calculate the contribution of non-tree photosynthesis or like the Baker wetlands?
That's a great question. And you're not the first person who's asked.
That's good.
And yeah, we have a lot of people that recognize the importance of the prairies and the wetlands. And that we don't actually have a way to do that right now, but we're working on that. And that's something that we are trying to put into the plan when we get into the implementation side, is how can we measure how much coverage is green outside of just forests and trees? So, yep, definitely looking at that. That's a great question.
That number can only go
John?
up.
What's the unit of measurement?
Yeah, it should be on here. I was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't. It's, let me give it to you exactly. It's not something I have publicly talked about enough to be able to just rattle it off.
Tons per CO2.
Tons?
It's in, right. Can you say it out loud? So,
Tons?
well, it is in tons, but it's the
CO2 equivalent?
the CO2 equivalent.
Okay.
Yeah, in tons. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And I realize that's missing from this slide, and it should be there. This also talks a little bit about the targets that we're trying to work toward. So there's several different actions. Mobility, the mobility section, which reflects the transportation area, is a big area where we can see a lot of actions take place. We're striving to get to 38.5% reduction in our emissions, and that's really only about, the recommendation is that wealthier nations and cities and counties try to work more towards 60%. 50% is what we need to get down to in order to not go too far. You guys are probably pretty familiar with what they've been talking about, the Paris Climate Agreements and the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. They're calling for a much greater reduction, but we're looking at what we can actually achieve here, and we're with our actions that we have in this plan, it's closer to 38.5%. If the grid was to decarbonize, we could get much higher. We could get a much higher reduction. This here shows what we looked at baseline. So 2021, what we had in our emissions, broken down by sector. We just did the top three here: residential, transportation, and commercial. And then if we didn't do anything at all, just because of industry standards and energy efficiency standards, there would be a little bit of a drop. We would start to see about 25% change. With the actions that we're presenting in this plan, it's 38.5%. So you can see how each one of these comes down. Transportation is represented in the teal color. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go down here to how to read the plan. So it's broken, all of the actions and the goals and the strategies are broken down into 4 different sections. We have energy, powering where we live, work, and play; mobility, moving around the community safely and efficiently; living systems, balancing land uses, ecosystems, and natural functions; thriving community, nurturing health and resilience across the county. So those are the 4 different sections that we have. Each one of them have co-benefits. So there are benefits beyond just mitigating climate change. There's a lot of intersecting benefits that come from these different goals and strategies, and those are indicated in each section. We have equity considerations that are coming. So that's not quite in the plan yet. We do have somebody that we're hiring that's a consultant that's going to help us flesh those out. And then there are, because we weren't able to cover every single topic in its own individual chapter, we went ahead and put in here where you could find different things. So if you're looking for agriculture and food, that's not a section all on its own, but it can be found in living systems and thriving community, for example. There's a couple other common, more popular topics listed there as well. All right. So here's where we get into each of the different sections. I'm going to scroll down to mobility and kind of walk you guys through this particular section. So this is the one that's moving around the community safely and efficiently. There were lots of different stressors and opportunities that we heard in those focus groups and the other community outreach that we did. Stress on workers and infrastructure and extreme conditions, access to daily needs or travel of essential goods and emergencies, vehicle pollution impacting youth and other vulnerable populations, travel discomfort, delays or obstacles in extreme weather, travel accessibility in hazardous or disruptive conditions. And then this little box down here at the bottom shows some of the different plans that we consulted to look for alignment with. And some of those are obviously T2050, and I know some of you guys served on that steering committee as well. Safe routes to schools, Baldwin City, Eudora, and Lawrence's. There's a countywide bike plan that we looked at. We looked at the intelligent transportation system plan, the Lawrence pedestrian plan, and then there were some other ones as well. Here is the greenhouse gas inventory repeated here, and what we're looking at for actions to reduce the emissions that come from the mobility section. And we're looking at, the very obvious one is reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So that's moving people away from cars and more into other modes of transportation, walking, biking, wheeling. We're looking at 10% over time reduction in vehicle miles traveled. And then in addition to that, electric vehicle adoption as well, so about 16% over time. And that's between the year 2021 and 2030. That's the year that we're going out to. And that would bring down the emissions for just the transportation section alone by 32%.
This is probably going to betray my ignorance of just how electric cars are more efficient, but if the electricity is being made at the Evergy plant and that's still counted in the inventory,
right.
How does that reduce emissions, I guess?
Yeah, it reduces emissions as those plants become more renewable, and there are plans to decarbonize more and more. Right now, Evergy is looking at about 30% reduction or 30% decarbonization, okay. And that will only increase over time.
Okay, so the assumption then is that the electricity is not necessarily coming from here, but from probably further afield.
From in renewable sources. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was also wondering, are the percentages put forth, what's the, I guess the background on those numbers, 10% and 16%?
Yeah, you wanted the background on those numbers? Oh, yeah, that's okay. So we worked with a third-party consultant, ICLEI, on these numbers, and these are goals that they recommended to us.
Okay. Did they explain the justification? Like, this is something that somebody could actually do?
Yes, that's what it comes from. And yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer than that. But yes, they were recommendations from ICLEI in their research on what's possible.
Okay. Cool.
Any other questions on the reduction targets or the inventory itself?
I think it'd be useful to know a little bit more, like, setting goals are great, but if the audience doesn't understand if they're even reasonable, it just opens up possibility for questions and doubt in the plan. Mm-hmm. So if there's any evidence that could be inserted in this, that could be really helpful.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah. So adding in a little bit more about the background of where these targets come from and right. How they're feasible. Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah.
Like, what is it contingent on? Is it contingent on shifting our mode to transit, or what? What's the thinking behind this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hopefully looking at the goals and strategies will kind of start to answer that. But let me know if it doesn't appear to be that way. And maybe they need to be up there a little bit more explained in
you're
actual.
Suggesting this is possible in the next 7 years?
Yeah, that's
6 years.
That's what we're aiming for. Yeah.
That seems pretty impressive if we can do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to have a little bit more of an explanation there to kind of show what is truly possible and how we can get there. But that is what we're aiming to do with these individual goals and the strategies that go underneath them. So, for example, the very first goal is about reducing or enabling low carbon modes of transportation while improving access to everyday needs, so people can continue to go to work and do what they need to do, but do it in ways that are low carbon. And these are things that you guys are all working on here in this commission, and there are lots of other groups I know working on trying to improve the roads to make it more possible for people to bike, ride, wheel, and use other modes of transportation. So this one just it reinforces that. And we're looking at better densification, so looking at the 15-minute city components. If you guys have heard of those, it's an urban planning component. And recommending that be used in long-range planning, looking at locally relevant parking management. So these are things that are also showing up in the Lawrence Development Code, and other cities are looking at this too. How can we improve parking management so that we're, again, encouraging and not discouraging people from biking and walking and wheeling. And and then incorporating alternate travel ways or paths for walking and biking in unincorporated areas. So we want to make sure we're, again, using that county lens, looking beyond just the city of Lawrence. And then the electric vehicles and electric bicycles. Actually, this was one, I think, Damon, I think you were the one that recommended the promote incentives and rebates for the purchase of e-bikes. Does that sound right? Yeah. So we're trying to do more than just the electric vehicles, also looking at other modes as well. Any questions about any of these so far?
I had a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, let's see. The question was, okay. Was there any discussion on sort of stick approach versus carrot approach? It seems like everything is make the other things more available, but there's not a lot of talk of make the things that are causing the problem less easy or more expensive or harder to do. I mean, I can understand the issue, with equity concerns, especially in the present, where everybody's pretty much completely car dependent. But I don't know. I'd like to hear you guys sort of insight on how those conversations went, or if those were considered. Maybe they were too harsh for a plan like this.
Yeah, and this is the very first climate action plan for Douglas County, and we really meant for it to be a starting place. And so I hear you, and we did look at we definitely did whittle this down quite a bit. It did start much more detailed and had a lot more of that in there, and we decided to kind of move more towards a more friendly approach with it.
I'd be curious to hear what didn't make the cut. Not to mention that, like, what was almost on there and like, this isn't really the time for it yet.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if I can go back in my memory and remember you. Maybe Damon can remember something that didn't make it in there.
I think I posted a bunch of kind of, what's the term for it? I'm losing my words, but I
Stuff like that.
I put a link for, I think, charging property tax for vehicles based on weight, I think was one of those references that, those are...
Instead of age of car, which is what it is right now, which is like, and like the value was when it was new, which is insane, because like a 2000 F-150 charges hardly anything. Like a brand new Prius is going to cost a lot more for property tax, but the damage they do to the roads is pretty different, so. But I've run into roadblocks so far trying to propose that to the county, so.
Yeah. I think we're just kind of short on good precedent for a lot of the stick approaches. Like even New York City is having a huge challenge with doing, rolling out congestion pricing. It's been going on for 15 years now, it seems.
Yeah. At least DC was able to pass the registration based on weight thing, so like, there is an example. There's not very many.
What about the one on parking management? I guess I don't know exactly what that means in that sentence as far as part of the rule, but I mean, that would seem like possibly the part of the stick approach in terms of limiting parking, but I don't know if that's what is meant by that, by this statement.
It could be, again, because we're trying to keep stay open to all the different cities. What works in Baldwin City may not work here in Lawrence, so the recommendation is that they look at parking management strategies that are very locally relevant, that make them the most efficient as possible. And there's a little box at the bottom that further explains that, but it doesn't give the, it is an area we get a lot of questions about, is the parking management in particular. So we might need to put some more examples in there, a little bit more of like, what could you choose from? And parking maximums and minimums, those are good strategies that a lot of cities are employing.
Right.
This looks like it was a lot of work to kind of put together. I'm curious, are there any existing documents for similar population and size towns as Lawrence and the county, where they're maybe further ahead, maybe they're already at the place where the goal is for Lawrence? And to look at what they did? Was that part of the process, or was that just not available?
Well, there's not like a lot of other plans that are out there. There wasn't really like a place on the website where you could just look at all the plans that are out there. It was really just Google searching and finding out what's out there, talking to peers that have worked on climate plans. We're part of other peer organizations that helped put us in touch with other county and city plans. But your question's really good, and I don't know that I came across one that was further ahead necessarily than Lawrence, other than, I guess you could say, the plan, I can't remember the name of the county, but there was a county in Colorado that I looked at, and they were definitely further ahead, as Colorado tends to be.
Were they further ahead in actual results, or was
Results,
it just
and I guess that's what-
policy changes, or?
Both policy changes. They're a lot further ahead when it comes to electric vehicles, and yeah, I guess it depends on what you're looking at.
Sorry if I cut you off, so take it back if you want. But I think I'm going to go where I think you want to go. Understanding how we fare compared to other communities is often important in our conversations. If there's a way to situate where Douglas County is now relative to other communities that we might compare ourselves to, that can be really helpful.
Okay.
And I'm looking at
Yeah.
your forecast for emissions. It's not really indexed to like population size. I would wonder if there's some way to say, for our community size, here's what emissions look like today. Here's what they will be expected to look like without this plan. Here's where they'll go with the plan. And if it turns out that in all cases, that's still not even close to what other peer cities are doing, and I would wonder if we need to go to, like Nick's saying, maybe we need to be more aggressive about this. Maybe we're being too relaxed about just how much pain people need to have to see a change. I mean, it looks to me like by 2030, we're not going to make a whole lot of difference. And I wonder, like, is that because we're not willing to, or we just think that's all that's feasible technologically? But knowing that other communities have, a different per capita emissions, tell me, like, oh, if they can do it, what makes Lawrence, why couldn't we do that? So something that kind of shows where do we fall relative to other communities on a per capita basis would really provide insight, I think, into where are we? Maybe we're doing awesome.
It seems like part of the issue is that there's a cooperative state government is also a factor. And I would have a feeling that the Colorado legislature is probably a little bit more open to, moving the needle than the Kansas legislature has been.
Right.
I think that one actually is stated in the goals where it's like, it should be 60%, but like, we can't do this as just Lawrence, it's gotta be the state and national as well.
Right.
But I still agree with you. It'd still be interesting to see.
But one thing that would be interesting to compare when you're thinking about different, things we could do locally. For me, I'm not seeing a whole lot about transit in here. And the most significant way to change this is to get people to stop using their own vehicles. There has to be an alternative that doesn't involve walking and biking. People aren't all going to walk and bike. So our bus system is probably the most obvious alternative to using a personal vehicle.
Right.
There's a little bit of mention, but it doesn't seem, I guess I'm looking for a lot more aggressiveness around public transit.
And you're talking about in the.
So those communities that maybe have greater investments in public transit, how do they stand when it comes to per capita emissions?
Yeah. So two things I want to make sure I address there. One of them is on the emphasis on greenhouse gas inventory was only a part of this plan. We did an extensive community outreach, talked to a lot of people to find out what do people really want to see here in our county. And so the inventory came secondary to what we heard from people. So comparing to another community, just greenhouse gas inventory alone doesn't really even scratch the surface on what we can do to adapt to the changes we're starting to see alongside mitigating. So that's part of why you don't see so much comparison to other communities, is because this is really, it's a hybrid plan of the two. A lot of emphasis placed on adaptation in here as well. So it makes it a little bit harder to compare, but I will look back to see what we can put in there for comparison's sake. Also, another thing that makes it kind of hard is that not every community does a greenhouse gas inventory every year or every 3 years. The recommendation is every 3 years once you've gotten started. And so it might be a little hard to find one from 2021 that really mirrors our community size.
Okay.
On public transit, we do have some things in here on, and a lot of it's grouped together. You're right. There's not a lot of specifications or like very, we didn't get into the weeds with shared mobility and using microtransit, but those are in the plan. And it's meant to, again, have that county perspective and not just be limited to Lawrence. If we went into a lot of great detail on public transit, it would really be more of a Lawrence plan.
Sure, but the vast majority of our population lives in Lawrence.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right in that in that regard. Do you see something that's not quite covered when you look at the bigger
I guess
picture
it is
of?
a matter of the degree that you cover the types of interventions that might be effective.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's clear to me that most people aren't going to shift their mode from using a car to biking. I mean, we've done this for years, and that just isn't viable for most people. But if you look at other communities that have made significant investments in public transit, you do see a significant shift in mode. So it's something that, Lawrence in particular has a readiness to do that, but no one knows to what extent. We've passed sales taxes to allow for support for our public transit system. We're providing free public transit this year as a pilot. So there's definitely support for that in this community.
Yeah.
It's hard to know how much support.
Right.
If we were to say we need to be more aggressive and have bus service that really meets people's needs, how much more would that cost us? Would it be worth that investment if it, would that make a significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions?
Right.
Because people would have to start choosing not to drive
Right.
themselves. So
Exactly. Yeah. How is that pilot going? Have any results come in to show maybe month to month?
we haven't had an update from the transit director about it, so
Okay.
it's a great question.
Yeah. I've been wondering about it, and I was also wondering, do you know if there's plans to continue it or funding?
Not
to
that we've been
continue?
told.
Okay. Great. All right.
Just out of curiosity, about the emissions, I mean, I'm kind of new to Kansas area and stuff, but because I know with all of the winds that come through, or just like with the fires that were up in Canada that kind of affected us here, is there any other things from Topeka or from Kansas City that plays into this factor for
Yeah.
these emissions? Or is this strictly, I mean,
Oh, you were talking about where are these emissions coming from? Is that the question?
well, I mean, is there outside of the community emissions coming in that affects these statistics?
The statistics that we have here are just Douglas County.
Okay, but
So it's-
I mean, is there any other factors that could influence those?
Give me, you said like the wildfires, like that kind of, or,
That
Make
is
sure I
just,
understand.
that's a situation, but I'm saying, is there some wind factors that could affect what's shown in here for Douglas County? Okay, never mind.
yeah, I just want to make sure, I'm just a little puzzled, I'm not sure that I'm following the question. Do you mean, are you thinking of emissions as, so the way the emissions are measured is by what we actually use. So when a car is traveling, we track miles and look at emissions
Yeah.
based on that.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But I mean, is there, any other factors that come into that? Okay, never mind. Now, okay, it's been answered.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
I think, so in air quality,
Yes.
you talk about emissions, like ozone is one that,
Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
I don't think this really relates to that, but I think in other ways we would study emissions.
Well, okay, because here, okay,
Those
so.
patterns would have an impact.
Yeah, because
Yeah, and
I'm from Arizona, okay?
Right.
And we had a lot of emissions that would come from California, through the winds and stuff. I understand
Yes.
that it's not that great of a, thing here. But is there any other, I mean, that's what I'm trying to find, is there anything?
Yeah,
that-
I understand now. Yeah, that helps to understand. You're talking about actual air quality, and we actually don't have air quality monitors right here in Lawrence. We rely on air quality monitors in Topeka and Kansas City, and that helps us see whether or not
Okay.
how we're performing in terms of air quality. But the emissions that we're measuring here are the ones that contribute to climate change. So the major one there is carbon dioxide. That's really the main thing that we're actually looking at. What traps heat?
So if I may, I think maybe what you're trying to get at is that forest fires do release carbon dioxide because of how they burn, and carbon monoxide as well. But because the burning is happening in another county, unless it happens in this county, it's not our emissions. I think that's basically how it breaks down. Even if it were to waft over, it starts here. So like even if our tailpipe emissions are wafted
Well, yeah, I'm
over,
sure
it's
that
still
they're
our
able to distinguish which from the fire smoke and emission smoke, I'm sure.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, pollutants from, say, Topeka, from the freeway, from 70, how does that affect this area?
That would be in their inventory instead.
I think also it's the model that's being used isn't based on actual measurement. It's based on
Data.
the equipment that's producing that emission. So you can count how many vehicles are on the road, and from there, kind of use a model to say, this is how much carbon dioxide is being emitted from those vehicles. It's not a,
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
it's more of a model.
Okay.
So when,
It's basically just whatever goes to Douglas County is what you're counting, no matter where it comes from.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
be interesting
with
to
that.
actually have a monitor. I'd be curious about that too.
That does bring up kind of an odd question though. Is spring burn in Douglas County included as part of these emissions?
No,
Okay.
we weren't able to track like particulate matter and,
I mean, it still releases carbon dioxide. It's just like,
sure.
do you know how many acres?
Yeah,
we do,
absolutely
right?
do.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, all the things that we tracked were in the greenhouse gas inventory. And in fact, I can pass this around. Maybe you guys would be interested in taking a look at the printed, the full report that talks about our inventory. And I can make this available to you guys if you want to have a copy of it.
It's probably
well.
online, right?
That one is not online yet. Yeah, it will be.
Okay.
I kind of want to follow up on what you brought up about the kind of the metric used, because so this is using total tons of carbon dioxide, and if it's not done per capita, how does that factor in if there's a population change in Douglas County? You know, like the population in Douglas County goes up, then one would imagine if everybody's behavior stayed exactly the same,
Right.
then the total carbon emissions would also increase.
That's right.
Is there a
Yeah.
correction at all for that?
There is.
Okay.
In T2050, there is a chart that shows how population will change by the year 2030 and beyond. And we did use that or the ICLEI did, use that calculation. Yeah, so everything has assigned a factor, and then including, there is a per capita as well used in here. Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's hard to, what we're getting at here is some of the challenges we're coming up with against, or I won't say against, but in a lot of the small group sessions, it's easy to quickly get tied down into the weeds of this
Yeah.
stuff, but when you think about mobility in Lawrence, it's not hard to imagine where we stand if, for instance, when you visit a city like Seattle, you get off the flight, you can grab a train, you're in the city, and I would push back against the idea that people in Lawrence aren't willing to bike by transportation, because like the Netherlands or places like that, with similar climates, all those people aren't biking just because they're good people.
No, I'm not suggesting it can't be done.
Yeah.
But the infrastructure investments would be pretty significant. And
Right.
when you think about what can we do with the money we might have, probably getting people to shift to transit would be the quickest way to see a mode shift away from using the vehicle. Vancouver, British Columbia, they've made a clear goal to prioritize transit like over half their population uses transit. So communities that have made that their primary way to shift people away from using vehicles, I imagine they have seen improvements in greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
To make bicycling a viable activity for a large segment of our population, like 50% would probably just be impractical. And it might take us like redesigning not just our roads, but even how we build as we continue to, grow as a community. So,
It's investment,
so the
any of these things.
the same community can get there faster by using transit than they would be to rebuild for a bike intense kind of activity. So that's where it's just really saying, of the modes, which one is going to contribute in the simplest way toward the goal, if the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And if you look at the data around bicycling, it hasn't changed significantly. Not that transit has either, but I think if you're trying to say, what can I do with $1 million, or let's say $100 million, probably you're going to get further faster by investing in transit than in bicycling infrastructure. That's kind of where that's what I'm thinking. Not to diss bicycling at all.
Was that part of your community feedback, finding out as far as just people who are responding, what they would prefer as being
For the mode of transportation.
their solution for this issue?
No, well, in the community survey, yes, not in the focus groups. We didn't actually ask that question, but in the community survey we did, and a lot of people did mention public transit and biking and walking. All of them, I would say they were all mentioned in there multiple times. And on public transit, the one that I saw the most was probably around the shelter that's used at the different stations. This is great. What other, rather than me kind of going through each and every one of these by themselves, what other questions or discussion do you guys want to have? I think we have what, till 6 o'clock, 6:15?
So there is data on the per capita emissions for the US. I mean, maybe at a very basic level, just comparing ourselves against national data would be helpful. It says 17.6. I guess I'm assuming tons of CO2 is.
They always use that same
So, like,
coefficient.
Are we at 17.6 in Douglas County from this inventory? Does it tell us that, or are we emitting more or less?
Yeah, I think we could put that comparison in there to show how we compare to the U.S. Of course, yeah. Again, we were not trying to put too much emphasis just on this one metric. There are a lot of different ways to measure climate performance or how we're performing as a community. So we just didn't place all the emphasis on the inventory itself.
Very good. Looks like we're at 13.1 versus 17, so that's good,
Oh,
based on the numbers in the report.
so that seems good.
There you go. I had a question about goal G3S2 about, there's one that says incorporate alternate travelways or paths for walking and biking in the unincorporated areas. What do you envision that looking like? Are we talking like in Germany and the Netherlands where you have these long distance bike paths that go between town to town, or just like sidewalks? Like what's the vision?
Yeah, so this one is aligned with the countywide bike plan. And the way that I envision it, at least, and Kathy, we can speak to this too if you'd like. But yes, they're well connected so that you can bike and walk between the different cities within the county if you choose to use that mode of transportation, that it's available to you.
Is there a lot of demand for that at this time?
There, based on what we heard in the focus groups, yes, there was definitely interest for that. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you just how much demand there is.
Okay. I mean, like obviously it works in other countries. I just don't know if that's because they've already fleshed out the bike network in cities and they're like, all right, now we can do bikes everywhere. Let's just start.
Yeah, I think what I remember hearing mostly was on the recreation side, not so much for commuting, where we see the biggest dent would be in commuting.
Yeah.
But getting anybody we can get, any way that we can encourage more time spent outdoors, the more progress we're going to make on this plan and with our climate emissions overall.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, because if it's commuting, that's required travel. So
Right.
increasing carbon footprint of required travel would seem to me a priority.
Yes.
Over
Recreation.
allowing recreation opportunities. Which, don't get me wrong, biking is rad.
Right.
It's really fun to go on cool gravel paths.
Yeah.
But if the point is to just overall decrease it.
Right.
Okay, instead of driving to work and we make your bike to work fantastic and comfortable, nice place to park the bike. And, you know, thinking about Europe, they have nice places to park their bikes, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's something to do with that. I very rarely even lock them because it doesn't matter, so many people have so many bikes. This is not even an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a question for you guys. Do you think that from what you've heard and what you've learned from being on this commission, do you see that aiding in reducing vehicle miles traveled in cars?
Bike parking specifically?
Well, this one here, I mean, we could talk about bike parking too, but I was thinking more about this, connecting the different cities and counties.
I feel like that maybe would be a better question for somebody like Pat who actually does those rides out in the county. Like, are you going to do it regardless of if there's a nice path or not? Or are you going to just find a way?
Well, you know, I mean, I think with the out in the county, that there are certain routes that people take because, you know, it's like 458 because the shoulder is safe and you know, so there are routes. And I think, you know, the other thing is people do recreational and it can spill over into, you know, they've got the bike, they're doing recreational. Okay, maybe I'll take my bike to work, you know, for some other opportunities. So, you know, recreational cyclists use it for other purposes. But, you know, going back to like parking and some of those amenities that make it comfortable for people to commute and, you know, have your bike safely parked without fear of being stolen and those kinds of things. So, you know, the infrastructure is important, important there, but I think the encouragement can come from those other recreational routes and just the visibility that it brings to cycling, to the motoring public too. I think, you know, that more that they see cyclists out there, you know, to be encouraged to do that, or at least to show the road, if nothing else.
I guess just to try to make my thinking clear here, if this was a single budget for a unified county city government, I feel like this would be a total waste of money when we could be building capacity in town where there's actually likely to be a benefit. But since it's two different pots of money, it's like city MSO and county MSO, whatever they're called. Yeah, in that case, it's really just an equivalent suggestion, right? Like, you in the city, you should build more bike lanes and make better transit. You in the county, may as well do the same thing too, right?
Yeah,
Even if
connect them up.
even like the impact is not going to be nearly as great. It's going to cost a lot more to get the needle moved, but it's not like they can do much in the city of Lawrence anyway. So like, that's not, yeah, that makes sense. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. It was just kind of strange to see it right next to like another important suggestion. Like, oh, do we really need walking paths in the middle of nowhere? I don't know. But I'm a city guy, so.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and that's where again, lies the challenge.
In the smaller communities too. You
Yeah,
know,
like in the
more,
communities for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Baldwin, and, you know, making sure that's a consideration as well, so.
Yeah.
So when you guys were all chatting, there's a lot of real practical stuff here that looking at infrastructure and things like that. Was there any discussion about how to kind of advocate for cultural shifts? You know, because there's a lot of kind of softer advocacy things that happen, I don't know, bike to work days or things like that that just encourage a culture, community to do it as a community. As opposed to like, this is a really new bike path. They're kind of two different.
Like, yeah, try to have incentives to go out there and actually use
something, or just how do you make it fun, I guess, or
Right.
You know, a community thing.
Yeah.
More so than a practical thing, or both. You know?
Yeah, so the way that we have discussed that, and there has been a lot of recommendation to add in here what people can do, what the community members can actually do to help move the needle as well. And we do have plans to have another part of this plan that helps spell out, like it'll tie back to policies and programs that government is doing, and then what the person can do with that on the ground. So, yeah, definitely. And we do need the cultural shift as part of this. And that's why we started with those focus groups, so we could reach out to the community first and help them see this is what we're trying to do and get that feedback. And then we're circling back to those same people now. So hopefully that will all come together in a cultural shift. That's the hope. Because we definitely, government can't do it alone.
Yeah, it's another arrow in the quiver, you know, it's like, here's your award for the most miles covered by a commuting cyclist or something.
Right, yeah.
And that's like an award.
Uh-huh.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And these are the kinds of conversations I have with friends on the weekends. Like, what kind of voucher do you need to have if you ride your bike to the bakery or something? Can they give you a discount? Or
Number of rainy days you bike to work.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, on the most challenging days.
Yeah.
And what did you wear?
That's a good American.
Yeah, right. Kathy, do you have anything you want to add right now? I've been kind of quiet. I don't know if you want to say anything about anything you've heard so far. Or... Okay. I know Kathy's kind of lost her voice a little bit from a meeting she was in before this, but feel free to chime in at any time, of course.
This is something doesn't really relate to transportation, but am I reading this correctly, that there's an assumption that the number of trees would not change? Like
Right now, the way that we are looking at our targets is that we won't reduce it, that will stay 20%.
Is there a lot of pressure to reduce the amount of tree coverage?
There's not pressure to reduce it. I mean, with
Like through development, is that?
Through development, there could, I mean, there.
Is maintaining it, I guess, going to take effort, or is that just?
Yes, maintaining would take effort, that's right.
So to
And the living
increase
system
tree
section
coverage?
kind of goes into a little bit more of that,
Did it-
of really respecting and acknowledging the living systems, the systems that make us, the natural systems that make us more resilient.
It seems like the amount of reduction just by maintaining tree coverage is actually greater than the reduction by making the changes in the transportation.
Or just by maintaining it alone.
I don't know if I'm reading this right, but 151,000 by maintaining. And then the reduction between 21 and 2030 for transportation and mobile sources is 371 down to 252.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 120. So we'd be better off maybe just planting more trees?
I think in addition to these actions.
A good thing, keep you from doing more good things.
Well, I
Yeah,
know we talk
we just-
sometimes about how trees are important to slow down vehicles. So I'm trying to make a connection, but that
Yeah.
just surprises me how much can be done just by growing more, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, vegetation is a wonderful way to, I mean, that's what plants consume, is carbon dioxide, the top greenhouse gas in our atmosphere.
I was going to bring up something kind of similar, and that is that there's a lot of mowing that happens around town that really doesn't need to happen for the most part. And I feel like we could have a lot more just impromptu forests if we just stopped mowing all the time.
Or
And-
switch to electric motors.
but then you still don't have the trees to take the carbon dioxide, right? Like grass is fine, but trees are real good. So, I mean, it's kind of a silly recommendation, I guess I would propose to add, but like, less mowing can't hurt necessarily. I mean, it's good for habitat restoration. It's not great habitat, but it's better than a roadside median, you know? So,
Yeah.
just something silly. And then there's another thing about impervious surfaces that I feel like I saw it mentioned, but it wasn't necessarily tied to transportation, but I think it does tie to transportation just because it's usually roads and parking lots and stuff. So I don't recall if I saw anything in there like we recommend there be less impervious surface here to reduce the heat island effect and, you know.
Yeah, that is in build, I believe it's in the goal number 4, build resilience in our transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, it was
I
that.
believe is where I saw that, or we put that. In the very first one, we have conduct an audit heat vulnerable neighborhoods and identify opportunities to incorporate protective shading and green infrastructure elements. And I believe there's one about seek opportunities to repurpose and restore underutilized paved surfaces to green space.
Okay.
So maybe not the language that you would be expecting to see in there.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
a little
I-
bit more straightforward.
I think I probably just read past the second one, so, okay.
Yeah, and and I have to tell you, I think that this one here, the one about seek opportunities to repurpose and restore, I believe that was supposed to be number 3, and it somehow got combined and lost in there with number 2. I just happened to see that today, so I think that was something that happened in the design.
Okay, cool. Any final thoughts? I want to get public comment in because I have a feeling you're waiting for that. Any last thoughts? Closing remarks?
I would just add that we have the open houses coming up. November 9th is our first one. It's at Sunrise Project, and it's for youth. So if you have anybody between the ages of 13 and 29, I believe, or somewhere close to that age group, there's going to be food and prizes and opportunity for their voices to get incorporated by looking over this plan with us. And then we have a general open house on November 13th. It'd be great if you guys could come out to that. It'll be at the train depot in the evening from... I forgot the time right now. Oh gosh, I've got it written down. 5:30 to 7:30.
The one in North Lawrence or the?
North Lawrence. Yep. And then we are doing a work session like this for the county commissioners in the same week, November 15th. And then we'll have 2 additional open houses as well, one in Baldwin City and one in Eudora is what we're looking at right now. So anything you guys can do to help us promote it and get more voices on the plan would be great.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I need to stop sharing, is that right?
All right, do we have any public comment in the room?
Public comment?
Yeah, you can come over here if you want. Sorry, thanks.
I hadn't planned to speak. I wanted to come down and see how many dared bike here tonight. Theft, as I may have told you, is becoming rampant. They're stealing bikes in broad daylight. They took a bike apart at the railroad station where there should be a bike box. They just took one apart in broad daylight and on film. They stole a whole bike rack down at the Senior Resource Center, just unbolted. It wasn't properly installed. No telling what kind of bike they got with it. It used to be that a thief would look in here and think, I'm not going to mess with a bike out here, because he sees all the activity. Go look at the tool rack. There are no tools there. There's not proper lighting there. And it's too far from the entrance. If that's permanent, we need a bike rack right here. Anybody that's got any familiarity with the bike theft will bring their bike inside. But I'm going to be speaking with the county commission soon and telling them that for 9 years, the last 9 years of my working life, I biked for 4 years at the Lone Star, and this is sometimes 7 days a week. And then I biked just over the line in DeSoto for 5 years, and I did that. And this was year round. Whenever there are times when I couldn't do it, but you get back to town. Let's say, and you want to go to the courthouse. Where are you going to park a bike? If you think you're going to park a bike over by the Judicial Center in the wave rack, you're nuts these days. Are you familiar with the previous county executive? Craig Weinog,
Oh, yeah,
serious cyclist, right?
right.
You were there? Where did he park a bike?
I think he brought it into his office.
Of course he did. Was that because he was a big shot? And I called and talked to the fellow in charge of the rebuilding project. You got it all torn up. When's a good time to put in quality bike parking? Hadn't even thought of it. So this committee knows that I'm really disappointed in it for not taking its responsibility. I have heard some encouraging words from you, sir, whoever you are, and of course from Pat. I'm such a happy guy.
Just so you know, the second module of the zoning code
I don't
was
want to
released.
know that. How do you know that?
You should definitely comment on it because it is very specific things to bike parking. So if there's stuff that you don't like, then we really need to know that.
And we've been here before.
All right. All right. Anybody online for public comment? Doesn't look like it. Oh, wait. I guess Hillary's there. That's not really public. All right, well, in my case, we're breaking until 6:15, and see you guys back in 10 minutes. Thanks again. Transportation Commission's November meeting. So, we've already done the upfront stuff, so just jump right in. Yep. Starting with approval of the October minutes. Does any commissioner have any questions or comments or requested revisions on the minutes? And if not, I'd ask for a motion to do something about that.
I moved to approve the October meeting.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion to approve by Commissioner,
Collette.
sorry, it's one of those days.
It's a long day.
Second by Commissioner Bryan. All in favor, raise your hands. It's unanimous.
Is Hillary online?
Sorry, Pat, I didn't mean
Yeah.
that personally. All right, next up is general public comments. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Public comment will not be received for staff items, commission items, or calendar, though sometimes we have made exceptions. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments to the commission. Do we have anybody in the room who wishes to make a general public comment?
No one in the room.
All right, online?
No one online.
All right. Cool. Moving on to regular agenda items. So we're going to be first considering the 2023 Pedestrian Improvements Project field check plans and provide feedback.
Good evening, Jake Baldwin, Engineering Program Manager with MSO, and I'm going to present the field check plans for our 2023 Pedestrian Improvements Project. And high level, this project is really a combination of some sidewalk gaps and some ADA reconstruction sidewalk segments that we're kind of packaging together to hopefully go to construction later this spring, probably the end of spring of 24. Some highlights of the project. And actually, before I jump into highlights, all the segments that we're going to be working on are listed here in the memo, so I won't read through those verbatim. But high level, I was going to mention that we did remove a couple of the segments that we originally had in the plans, and I'll kind of touch on those as we go through the plan sheets. And then I just also note that when it comes to our ADA sidewalk reconstruction segments, those are pretty much going right back in on existing alignment. And again, that's kind of focused on minimizing impacts to landscaping, trees, driveways, all those things that, you know, the sidewalk's there for a reason, so let's not move it if we don't have to, unless it makes sense. And those are really block end to block end, so they kind of start with an ADA sidewalk ramp and they end with a sidewalk ramp. And with that, I will share screens and kind of jump in to the plans. Okay, so just on our title sheet, that kind of gives you a geographical representation of where these project pieces are going to take place. And the first one here is on 9th Street, just the block in there. That's an ADA reconstruction of the existing sidewalk. Moving on to Wisconsin Street, and what you're seeing here is from 6th Street heading north, and this is actually one of the sidewalk pieces we're pulling out of this project. So it is an identified need. However, there's a lot more going on this corridor that needs to be approached with a more comprehensive project. We don't have curb and gutter, so we've got stormwater problems on this section. The pavement's not in great shape. It's also on the primary bike network, so we need to get a facility here. This is where the network will end at. There'll be a shared use path coming in from the west on 6th Street, and the network has that going north to 5th Street and then back east. So again, lots of different pieces that we need to consider. It needs to be more than just a sidewalk project.
So Jake, excuse
Yes.
me, so you said that project has been pulled temporarily and
Yes.
to be
So-
combined with the other?
Right, so the strategy is staff is going to enter a CIP project next year to put all those pieces together and get it planned.
Okay. Because the 6th Street path is already is already in there, right? Is already in the CIP or at Wisconsin?
It's going to be built with another project.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So we can jump past this piece. Now we get to Fifth Street. So we are going to keep going north of Fifth Street with our sidewalk gap. We've got quite a bit of right-of-way here, so we are missing curb and gutter on this block as well, but we've got, like I said, a lot more right-of-way, so we can put that sidewalk in a place where we can do future improvements and not impact what we just built. Then we've got reconstruction on Arkansas from 8th Street to the north to 7th Street. Again, block end to block end, 5-foot wide sidewalks where the width would be variable, but more than likely 4. Compliant ramps. Again, sitting on the existing alignment to avoid the established trees and landscaping. And there we are ending on the north side on 7th Street. That's just kind of a zoomed in detail of those sidewalk ramps. Next segment here is on East 10th Street between Rhode Island and Connecticut. And you can see there's a little bit of driveway work where we encounter those. You'll see that it's on some alleys as well. Specifically here on 11th Street, we'll be touching both the alley entrances between Tennessee and Kentucky. And then one of the other pieces that we're going to pull from this plan set is the sidewalk on Vermont Street, basically north of the elementary school, or north of the elementary school to 17th Street there on the west side. We happen to have a street maintenance project going in that same area this year as well, and we don't want to build one and then come back and build the other, so we're actually going to take that project and put it together in-house and get it let and hopefully go to construction later this year. So it will happen, it's just not going to be part of this plan set. East 19th Street between New Hampshire and Rhode Island. Again, kind of the top of the block end there. And then here's where we've got one of the sidewalk gap projects, and this is on Harper Street on the west side, starting on East 25th Terrace and going north, essentially making a connection that will get you connectivity to East 23rd Street.
Hey, Jake,
Yes.
quick question. I saw this one does have like a little bump out for bus stop. I was just curious I think there was another bus stop on one of the other segments, but it didn't show the same kind of space. I was just curious what's the design process for, do we include bus stop or not?
Let's see, I guess the process for that would be is we coordinate with our transit department on these plans and make sure they review them to identify their preferred locations. I know they've got, I think, a study to move some of these around. Sometimes they're not in great locations. This is their chance to fix that. Other than that, we use ProAg guidance to get them the right slope and shape.
So I guess then presumably if there wasn't the same kind of concrete bump out on this other one that Damon's talking about, is it possible that that just wasn't on the list of stops to be improved in the next couple of years?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So I wonder, like, even if they weren't going to build a shelter, which is an expensive part, like, while you're there, maybe some extra concrete, so if they did have to build a shelter, it'd be easier. I don't know if it's worth it, though, if that's not even on their list, so. Okay. Interesting.
I'm trying to find, it's on, I think the 11th Street one from Tennessee to Kentucky. I think there's a bus stop, but it didn't have there is kind of a path right next to it that's there, so. I was just curious a lot of disparate bits I know, so.
See this on this sheet here?
Yeah, at least Google Maps was saying there's a stop on maybe the south side of 11th, near, kind of closer to Tennessee.
I think the route restructuring must be happening in real time because there's a ton of closed bus stops around the city. So I wouldn't be surprised if Google Maps was out of date or something.
Yeah, it could be.
And then like that bus stop is no longer.
That's something we can check with our team at Transit and make sure we're doing the right thing there.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Let me jump back to Harper here. Again, sidewalk gap projects, we have to do a little bit of curb to put ramps in. We've got to touch some driveways and tie back into them. We've got to relocate any water meters. In certain cases, we may have to remove trees. I think that might be the only one on the project.
Yeah, I think Google's around.
So on Harper and 24th, it looks like the sidewalk is much closer to the road than it is for some of the other sections. Is that because the right-of-way couldn't have been purchased? It looks like physically there's plenty of space there, but is it some sort of legal issue where there's just not enough room?
You said it did 24th?
I'm checking. Yeah, it's Harper and 24th Street.
I think that's where I'm at here on the screen. I'll have a label there.
Where'd it go? Oh. There it is, yeah. No, that's a little different from mine. Oh, I'm struggling here. That's
East 24th, here we go.
Where it's like right up against the road there.
Yep, so in this case, your right-of-way is actually clear down if you follow my cursor. So something happened with plating back in the day, and so we're going to have to get pedestrian easements to put these in here. In the ramp configuration kind of dictates where the alignment of the sidewalk's going to go in this instance.
Wait, so you do have to get pedestrian easements to get it up that far away from the road across the driveway?
Yeah, we're going to need easement on these two properties, I believe, on both sides, just because if you see that dashed line there is where the right-of-way is at until you get further north and south.
So I guess my question is that if you're already having to get those easements for the crossing, would it be possible to get easements to also move the sidewalk in? I mean, it looks like you'd be right in the tree line, which is a bummer. So either you're inside the tree line, right up next to those houses, or you're on the road, or you're at the trees. Like there's no really good option, I guess. I don't know. I mean, are there a lot of other tree replantings involved with this? Like, is that pretty common with sidewalk construction, or do you really try to avoid them as much as possible?
Well, this is just kind of the game you play when you put in sidewalks in established neighborhoods. You know, if we're in a green field, then we can avoid all these problems. But,
Right.
yeah, when we get into these situations, we kind of have competing interests to work with.
It looks like it would be about the same as it is on the other side of the street.
Yeah. It's wider for some reason on the left side of the page. I don't know if that's north or south or the arrow. Yeah, it looks like it's a wider sidewalk for some reason on the other side of the driveway.
Yeah, when we put it on the back of the curb, we add a foot, so it's 6 foot.
Okay.
That one to the south of 24th, right?
Yeah. I was trying to remember what the engineering design standards are. I thought I remember it's like 4 feet in established neighborhoods or something like that, and 6. Oh, it's 5. Okay.
5 foot minimum.
5 and it's 6 on arterials.
How many sidewalks actually conform to that? I feel like in East Lawrence, sidewalks are real skinny. But
There
I
are
don't know.
sidewalks that are less than 5 feet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't this one on this one side, isn't that industrial?
I don't know. I have no idea what's over here, honestly.
I think it is. The one on the east side of this street, isn't that industrial?
Not sure.
I mean, it would,
But that's a 5 foot sidewalk, I believe, on the east
Oh,
side.
okay, oh, no.
I mean, it would still have to conform to
24th,
engineering
okay.
design standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when it gets close to the site, or close to the street, you just go ahead and connect it all the way?
Yep, constructability.
What are the rules for having a railing? Because So I know on the Lawrence Loop segment on Delaware, and also, I don't know if it ever happened, but on Naismith, there were gonna be a couple of railings on that because it was like too close and you couldn't get the width, so you had to have a railing. Does the 5-foot width kind of negate the need for that railing?
No, the railing was because it was a shared use path.
Okay.
So you have bike considerations as well.
Okay, so only if bikes are involved does that trigger it? That makes sense. Okay.
And that takes us to the end of the plans there, so happy to entertain any other questions you have.
Anybody have any questions for Jake? I have kind of more general questions. So these are all sidewalk, or almost all sidewalk reconstructions. I'm still trying to figure out how this fits into the general, like, do-it-yourself sidewalk mitigation program, where it's like property owners have bad sidewalks that they get tagged by the city.
Sure.
And the fixing just gets added to your property tax assessment. But there were some places that were so bad for a whole block or two that I was like, these need to be like their own project, honestly. But
Right.
then I think, and I was never clear on like, all right, who pays for that then? Is it still billed to the property owners, but maybe they get better economy of scale because the whole block's doing it? Or how does that work out?
Okay, happy to explain.
Okay.
So, yeah, these back up, it starts with the sidewalk improvement program. We do inspections. We have 2 categories of sidewalks after that. Ones we can repair, ones we can't because they're so bad. Those ones we can't go into projects like this, an ADA reconstruction project. We treat those property owners the same as we treat the property owners in the sidewalk improvement program like they're doing repairs. So we'll go in here and repair block end to block end, but before we do that, we document the existing hazards. That way we can invoice the property owner for those square foot of just the bad sidewalk,
Okay.
not the driveway, not the good sidewalk. If there's a property in here that's developed within the last couple of years and has a brand new sidewalk, we're not going to touch it. We're going to tie into it.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I think regardless of where you stand on who should pay for sidewalks in front of their own houses, I think it is good to know that it is definitely fair, whether it's a spot fix or a whole fix, that you're paying basically the same rate as anybody else would, regardless of how extensive the whole sidewalk damage is. So,
Right.
that is good. Okay. Cool. Ed, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one. You're the actual sidewalk constructor engineer guy. You're the only one with real technical experience
Yeah.
here.
I'm still
Your thoughts?
confused about why the homeowner has to pay. I'm used to having the city already have the sidewalks in and everything else like that, but.
It's kind of happening.
State statute,
Yeah.
city ordinance.
And in some states, it's almost city by city too. It's kind of random, and like it's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't break down along any lines you would think it would, right? It's not like, really liberal cities allow, and it's just random. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. Okay. Any public comment on this item? Not looking like it. Also, Hillary, did you want to chime in? Because I've been terrible about looking at your avatar over there. So.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Sorry that I'm not there in person tonight, guys. No, it's good to see these. They look like works of art. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing, Jake, on this.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any public comment in the room or online, I guess we're done with this agenda item. I guess we gave feedback. That's the end of it, right? Then it goes to construction then.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thanks for presenting. Quick IT question. Kurt, my keyboard appears to be locked out. It's as if the control key is held down, but it's not. So I can't type anything. Everything I type is a keyboard shortcut. So I'm trying to figure out how to fix that, but it makes it very difficult to take notes. Oh, there you go.
How's that now?
Let's see. Let's do a typing thing. Nope, still doing Control F.
I'm actually not in IT, Nick, so.
AVIT, I mean, to be fair, you probably know computers better than anybody in this room, right? So,
I wouldn't say that.
I was hoping.
I feel your pain on this issue.
man, that's a bummer. All right, well, it's all up here. I'll do my best to just take notes here. All right, moving right along then.
I want to share
So, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, can
Yeah, the
I? I feel like the whole thing isn't really mine to change.
too.
Oh, no,
If I
it's,
needed that.
I would say unplug.
yeah, that's what I was looking for earlier. Like, can I just unplug this thing? That'd be sweet.
Yeah, you can try that, sure. And then we'll pay you an extra $1.
You getting this broadcast live on YouTube?
He's gonna double his salary.
The chair of the meeting's under the table.
I guess it wasn't the way I wanted to interrupt the meeting, but let's see, can I take some notes? Oh, now I can't do anything.
Your mouse is dead.
Great. Anyway, all right, so let's just move on to the next thing. I can just deal with this, I guess.
I think you unplugged the webcam.
I thought I followed the cord correctly.
It's one of the USBs. This is very entertaining, though.
Be a service.
Unplug all the USBs and start over.
There's another USB. Are we back? Well, at least my mouse is back. Okay, that's good enough. As long as I have a mouse, I'll be fine. Okay, sorry about that. We're back.
Let's start.
Moving on to item number 4. Anyway, item number 4 is staff presentation of the street maintenance program and the new 5-year plan, basically, right?
Yeah, and provide some feedback on our bikeway improvements and our recommendations. Good evening. My name is Steve Lashley. I am a senior project engineer with MSO. I do a lot of the contracted maintenance type of work, and whether mill and overlay, microsurfacing, things of that nature. And I wanted to go over and share the street maintenance program for 2024 with you and receive any feedback that might have pertaining to our recommendations concerning the bikeways and the comparison on with the program. The city commission adopted a budget of approximately $9.1 million for our 2024 street maintenance program. We have various items that are included with that. I'll go ahead and share a little bit of the, I think I will be trying to share. Top right, that Zoom window, blow that up.
There we go.
Green button.
There we go. I was just there and Jake just showed me.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, I think we're there. All right, in terms of the 2024 street maintenance program on that interactive map link, there's also other work year maps that that are available to look at, for our future planning, and based on, the current adopted budgets in the CIP. Back to the 2024, we have various locations that we're doing microsurfacing and patching, like the east half of North Lawrence. A good portion of that is all microsurface and patching with a mill and overlay stretch. We also have some other microsurface and patching that's up and around the Arrowhead and Brentwood area. Part of our 23 program, that we have some mill and overlay curb and gutter type projects that are adjacent to that. We also have, as Jake mentioned earlier, there is a mill and overlay curb and gutter project that is planned for Vermont Street between 17th and 19th Street. We also have a mill and overlay on East 19th from east of Haskell to Harper Street, and that's being collaborated with on a sanitary sewer and stormwater project in that corridor. They're going up Maple Street and they're going a portion east on East 19th. And then at that point, we wanted to go ahead and get that stretch mill and overlaid east and west of that project area. So we're coordinating with another project on that. We also have a mill and overlay curb and gutter project planned for Wakarusa between Queens and 6th Street. And then is kind of stubbing off of that is a stretch of Dole Street north of Wakarusa with mill and overlay. That pretty much, well, aside from, we also have a mill and overlay curb and gutter project that's currently in design for North 2nd and North 3rd Street. And there's state participating funds through the CLIP program, a connecting link
through the city. I believe the participation is 400,000 from the state on that, and the rest, with the city. So we'll have quite a bit of curb and gutter work along the corridor, as well as doing the mill and overlay. In comparison with those locations, we have, well, now I need to minimize that. Turn off the share, yeah. So typically what we do annually is take our street maintenance program or our plans, we compare that with the bikeway map, and in relation to on-street bicycle facilities, what might be able to be included with that, or reestablishing those types of facilities. And we utilize the bike plan level of comfort matrix and model tool to help us determine, some of those recommendations, and with the goal being a level of comfort of 3 or better being like a lower number. So if you're looking at 1 through 5, 3 to 1 is the preference in range for level of comfort per the bike plan. We have some streets that we're planning on including sharrows or shared marked lane markings, and also we have existing facilities, say on like 19th Street, where there's a existing bike lanes that we would be planning on reestablishing as part of the mill and overlay work. One of the items that we specifically wanted to get feedback on is we currently have plans to put sharrows on a few streets. I believe it's Lion, Dole, 7th and 9th Street, where they are collector streets with a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. And typically with, marked shared lane markings, sharrows are not recommended for anything, or for anything greater than 35 miles per hour, essentially. But we wanted to see if there's any additional comments or feedback that the commission would provide in terms of those recommendations, and install those sharrows on those collector streets that are 30 mile per hour. We also have been collecting, if you all are familiar with the pavement condition index, we had a recent collection. The most recent collection was in 2020, and we're looking at trying to go to a 3-year cycle in terms of updating our information and collecting a new data set. So we're currently in the middle of another data collection for basically a street assessment to get an overall feel of where we're at in terms of our streets being in satisfactory, good, or poor condition. Currently, we're at a level of 62.4 on a scale of 1 to 100 in terms of condition. Our goal is to get to a level of 70, which would be generally described as being satisfactory. So we base our proposed budgets on what this data is giving us through a modeling or a predictor modeling system, and what it's been given back to us in terms of recommendations has been, budget in the range of, $14 million. Now, within the last few years, we've had substantial increases in construction costs and just general inflation, and 30% or more potentially in a lot of cases. So we ended up in a position where we're recommending, so we're instead of 14.8 million, we're in the range of 19.2 million in terms of recommendations. And you can see where our budget levels currently are at. For 2024, we're at 9.1. The predictor is telling us that we need to do this amount of work to be able to accomplish getting to, say, that's PCI level of 70 within the next 10 years. So funding levels dictate a lot of obviously what we can accomplish. We try to we take our, budget and we try to find the best balance we can in terms of maximizing, the type of work that we can use, balance between mill and overlays, microsurfacing, other preventative maintenance techniques, all in the goal of, trying to accomplish, maintain our streets in good condition, preserve our investment, as long as we can. And at the same time, trying to increase that overall PCI level, that pavement condition level. Not sure if I have anything additionally beyond that. I mean, we mentioned that we have also our 5-year program out there. So as budget levels and so forth vary or increase or decrease, what have you, we will make those adjustments to that 5-year. As it's basically an ongoing maintenance of the planning for those various streets, and we try to coordinate, through collaborative efforts, along the various corridors. If we're planning on doing a mill and overlay, we work with other, utilities, like water, sewer, storm sewer. We evaluate those and see where they overlap and try to take the most cost-efficient approach when we're tackling, rehabilitation work on a corridor. I'd like to open it up if you have any specific comments or recommendations associated with our summary or our attachment of recommendations for our various sharrows and reestablishing bike lanes.
So I'm just curious, this level of comfort number, how is that determined?
It is based on the average daily traffic, the speed, the posted speed limit, primarily, and the type of facility. There's on the matrix, it is, for 35 mile per hour, the recommendation to do a sharrow, it won't even be available. So it won't even show that as a consideration. So there's certain parameters within the matrix, limitations, certain amount of vehicles per day, certain thresholds for amount of vehicles per day, and the speed on a corridor.
So I'm curious if there's consideration, if I think of North Lawrence, Elm runs parallel to Locust. Having biked that a bunch, Locust is a very uncomfortable road to bike just because there's a lot of traffic, big trucks, it's kind of bumpy. But the trick is Elm is one way. So when you're doing your planning with things like churros, is it possible to have it so, let's say, bicycle traffic is two-way on what's normally a one-way road for car traffic? Does that ever happen?
Well, and I guess that's where we look at the bikeway plan, because Locust technically isn't identified as a future bikeway.
Sure.
In the offset would be, utilizing Elm Street is actually the identified corridor. So in terms of, comfort levels and stuff, and I think some of these are identified as locations where the traffic levels are generally seen as being lower, so the vehicles per day, lower amount or lower speeds, and then these corridors are identified through the bike plan, and then and that's where we make our comparison, where we actually overlap with the type of maintenance of the various locations. So I'm going by that guide, and I don't know if I have a specific comment on Locust Street pertaining to associated with the bicycle facilities, because I'm looking at what is already or in the plan and making that direct comparison.
Well, I'm excited that that's part of the plan, because that does make sense. And I had never even heard the term churro before, and it's really neat to know what those things are called. I guess I'm curious, as far as that goes, just to notify a motorist that a bicycle can go both ways. I guess I'm curious as to if that's part of the discussion when those plans are being implemented.
Yeah, I think
Yes. If it was a one-way street, we would have to mark a bicycle lane going the other direction, a counterflow bike lane. We have one on Louisiana Street, the 1100 block of Louisiana Street.
Yeah, that's what's been.
So it's possible. I think one direction that's Sharrow's, and the other direction we had a counterflow bike lane. So it's possible to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
But as far as in our street maintenance plan, I don't know if we're doing a segment of street that's one way. Is that the Elm, that first block, east of
Yeah,
the
on this-
North Second? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
We'll have to evaluate that location when we
Yeah, we
get
can-
here, but generally, I would say with, yes, the Sharrows, the marked shared lane markers, they're there to give visual cues to not only, you know, the vehicles, you know, the drivers of the vehicles, but also, you know, for alignment for the bicyclists themselves, and the visual cues that this is for both, you know, the driver, bicyclists, that this is a, you know, share the road situation. And they are directional in the way that, you know, they have the bicycle marking as well as like a chevron kind of arrow pointing, you know, this is the direction. So it helps orient, you know, drivers and the bicyclists.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Steve, as far as the collector, so 7th Street is a collector, and you've got it marked as including a Sharrow on that street, even though the traffic levels are, let's see, what are they, 1725. So the discussion about whether or not it's a Sharrow or a striped bike lane, is that the choice there, or is it not wide enough for?
And that is, there were, you know, different limitations within the confines, you know, the width of the street is definitely something, you know, as part of the review and looking at, you know, there's various widths along that 7th Street corridor, and let's just say, in several of these streets, so like North 7th, 8th, 9th, you know, they're up to 20 foot, you know, 17 to 20 foot width. There's physically not enough room to be able to paint a separate bike lane on the width of a street like that. So that would not be part of the recommendation, because it just, the width is not there to be able to incorporate.
Right, because my experience on 7th Street has been the traffic travels probably significantly higher than 30 miles an hour a lot of times, and yeah, so whether a Sharrow will get what we need out of that, I'm not sure, but better than nothing at all.
I actually had a question about that. I've never looked into what the effect of Sharrows are. I have no idea. I mean, do they increase safety? Do they improve bike ridership? Do they help warn cars and slow them down? I have no clue. I've never looked at the data.
Part of the problem, I think, is that drivers, and I mean, even cyclists don't necessarily know what a Sharrow is and what the chevron means. That's supposed to be the positioning of the
Right.
bike on the road, and a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So,
Which creates conflicts where if you're following that and somebody behind you is like, get out of the way, like,
yeah,
no, this
because
is legal.
in some roads that are pretty narrow, that puts the bicyclist, and if it has parking on one side, it puts the bicyclist pretty much out in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And you know, cars don't understand that's the placement.
So are you thinking that if the Sharrow's not there, it makes it easier for everyone?
No, I'm just wondering if Sharrows don't have much of a return on investment in terms of improving metrics of traffic safety, if it's even worth it to spend money on them if we could spend that money elsewhere. I don't know. I don't even know if they cost a lot. It's just paying, right? But paint costs money.
Bucket,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's all speculative at this point, so.
I mean, as a cyclist, I
I
feel
hope.
marginally safer with a Sharrow as not have one, you know, but you know, there are other options I'd like to have, you know, that would be better, but that at least raises some awareness, but I'm not sure of the Sharrow hasn't been around all that long. I mean, I can remember when they were first, were on a trial basis with you know, the MUTCD, and so, and I haven't followed the research recently to find out, you know, whether they've determined what kind of effectiveness they have, but.
I mean, I would assume, and this is probably just, too speculative, but since they're not used widely in Europe, that they're probably, it's like an American thing, like, this is the best we can do, right? So, yeah, that might be it. I feel like this is one of those moments where it's like, what would Michael Allman say, right? Because he always has these really strong opinions on, no, a white stripe bike lane is useless. A Sharo, I don't know what his opinion on this is, honestly, so I don't know where Michael's at, but.
So the Sharo is really what you do when you don't have space for a white stripe lane.
Or anything else, yeah. I just worry that this is one of those cases where actually what seems like the solution is worse than the current state. I don't know that answer, but I know that we've heard that a lot on white stripe bike lanes, that apparently it's worse to have that than just don't have that, because then it encourages people to be in an unsafe situation. Okay, I can kind of see that. So, I don't know.
So when I think about how I taught my daughters to ride, having a mark on the street helped to tell them where they should ride.
Yeah, if there's a marker.
And it wasn't my goal to teach them how to ride on the sidewalk. That seemed very dangerous, in my opinion. When they're more skilled, then getting on a sidewalk is fine. But I think their first attempt on a sidewalk was when a babysitter didn't know any better, and she took them out to ride, and of course they fell off the edge of the sidewalk and then bumped up their knees, and it's just like, that's why the road is better. Now, talking about, residential roads, in my case, some of them didn't have any striped lane or Sharos. But
Yeah.
I would say if the NACTO guidelines are, don't do it when the speeds are above 35, or the speed limit is above 35, Pat, your comment about, maybe the speed limit is 30, but the actual speeds are higher, that concerns me. So if people were actually driving on the street at a higher speed than the posted limit, that makes me think maybe we shouldn't put the Sharo, because the guidelines seem to be, don't put Sharos where it might be really high speed traffic.
Yeah.
Well,
The 30 mile an hour speed limit, it seems like it kind of gets in between our locally adopted guidelines and then the NACTO guidelines.
I mean, just from like a psychological nudge perspective, would just the presence of the image of a bike painted really big on the street cause a driver to think that a bike might be present, whether it's present or not, and possibly nudge behavior to make them slow a little bit, considering that? It's just it's putting an idea into the mind of the driver that this may exist. 7th Street, you're coming off the highway, you're coming into North Lawrence, you're just going. And it is very narrow. So I would be concerned as a cyclist. But I'm sure those people don't even think that a cyclist would ever be present until the idea was introduced. So,
But that's,
I think that's partly why it's justified.
Sure,
But
sure.
we get into this whole, if it's going to be comfortable and encourage more riders, is it imply that it's safe? And maybe it's not.
Which is what Michael Allman's getting at, basically, right? Like, it's, yeah.
I feel safer with it, but
So do I.
I know I'm not the kind of rider
Right.
that we're trying to.
Yeah. I'm not my in-laws.
Bring on board.
It's my in-laws who I want to get to ride, and they would if it was safer, and they're not supposed those things. So I just did a very quick Google search, effect of Sharos on traffic, and a couple of concerning articles have come up that it's probably all based off the same study that everybody's glomming onto, but it's like, Sharos don't help, apparently. This is 7 years old, so who knows if it's changed. The data's probably changed quite a bit. But it sounds like what the Dutch say is that you should only use them in tandem with other traffic calming measures. Like, they're not good on their own. Apparently, putting them alone would be considered unethical. That's a very Dutch way to say it, like black and white. So there's no gray area whatsoever. I'm thinking, though, there might be other options, right? So I know you guys can't change the geometry of the road. You're stuck with the curb to curb. You can't change the minimum width of the lanes, and even if you could, there may not be enough room left for anything else. What we could do is change where the stripes go and the speed limit sign. Is there a way to change a 30 to a 25, like we did all over the city? Or perhaps is there a way to do, I wish I knew what this thing was called, Yield Street perhaps? Where there's like a center back and forth lane of travel and 2 bike lanes off on the side, where cars generally travel in the center unless they got to go around each other. That was actually proposed as part of the T2050 maybe? Jessica did a bit of a study on like visual preference surveys, like, do you like this? Most people said no, because most people have never seen that. but they work wonderfully well in the Netherlands, especially in more rural areas that look a lot like North Lawrence. Granted, the Dutch know what they're doing with driving and biking, so a little different. So I don't know. I guess, Steve, I'd put it back to you. Is it possible to do something a little different? Can we change the speed limit sign? Can we, maybe that's a Dave question too, right?
Well, just changing the speed limit sign is not going to change the behavior of traffic.
So why did
generally
we change them
speaking.
all over town then if we knew they weren't going to?
We did that on residential streets. These streets are collector streets, so that's why they've stayed signed 30 miles per hour. So I don't think that would not have an impact on whether or not we put sharrows in. The NACTO guidance, it's preferred 25 miles per hour or under, but it gives you the potential at 35 miles per hour or under. And so being that it's currently 30 miles an hour, I don't see the benefit of reducing the speed limit on those collector streets.
If I may, not all collector streets are created equally, right? Like some are wide, straight, flat, really good condition, and some are Lion Street, which is like kind of funky, kind of a rural road. Like, I mean, it's going to be nice, but currently it's like, it's small, it's got no curbs right now. Is it going to have curbs eventually? Is that part of the plan? I don't know.
It is not, no.
Okay. So like a street like Lion's a little different. Like it's, North Lawrence really is an animal. And since there are, I don't think this one, yeah, this has drainage ditches on the side and everything. Like it's a pretty small collector street. It's not even striped. So, I mean, if you ask the average person to compare this and a collector street like 19, is that a collector or is that an arterial? What's another collector street? Fifth? Just trying to compare it to something that like is clearly a 30.
Harvard.
Its location, it takes you right out of town. It feels like quite a different street than Fifth Street.
They both go through neighborhoods though, and they're both thin. In fact, Fifth Street is
7th
wider.
Street, I wouldn't see 7th Street as,
Oh, you're talking about 7th. I was talking about Lion.
oh, Lion.
Yeah, Lion's
I
different
thought we were
than
talking about
7th Street.
Okay, let me look at 7th Street.
I mean, 7th Street is
One
a
that you
route
get on
that-
and you just kind of take off.
This
If
looks
you're
like
leaving
a
town,
byway.
you're
Yeah.
not gonna feel, unless there's cars there, you're not gonna,
So
I mean,
like,
keep going north and you're gonna see it just becomes, you're on the edge of town.
this is a pretty skinny street. This is maybe 22 feet pavement.
Currently, it does not have sharrows.
No, it doesn't.
I don't have anything. It has.
Yeah, the street widths are on that table on the attachment, so they vary between, on 7th Street, it varies between, I think, 17 to 20 feet, which is a really narrow street.
That's like.
Generally, we see the narrower the streets, the narrower the lanes, the slower that traffic generally goes.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's.
but they are, for collector streets, they are low volume. 7th Street, 1,700 vehicles per day is a pretty low volume collector street. So, given the conditions of the volume, the speed, the characteristics of the street, we ultimately would recommend to put in the sharrows.
I feel like this is one of the streets that's maybe a prime candidate for one of those yield streets because it's not a lot of traffic, which means that it would probably function that way. The sort of built environment is exactly the one that you would typically use for a yield street, and I'm probably using that name wrong, but do you guys know what I'm talking about? Should I bring a picture of it?
I think it's the one where basically there's a single lane, stripes on the edge, so it looks like
Precisely.
shoulders,
Yep.
and you drive down the center,
Yep.
unless there's cars,
And then you get around.
and the shoulders are dash lines.
Yeah, so it's like self-traffic calming because you have to be on the lookout for other cars.
I just don't know if our community's ready for that, like.
Survival
looked
of
at
the
that
fittest,
as a-
they'll figure it out quickly. I would hope.
I'll start doing chicken.
I have a quick question for Stephen. On the table, I know there's an overlay between the maintenance, the street maintenance, and when you look at the bike plan. Is it though that, were these originally, like these streets that you're considering, were they originally designed to have the shared use or the sharrows on them? Or is this a different direction that you guys were planning to take? Perhaps that the bikeway would change in the future?
The the locations that we're planning on doing the work, but essentially we just took, we already had like the streets that we're planning on doing, and then we took the bikeway map and overlapped that with it, in terms of these layers, and just to see where these future bikeways overlap our existing facilities, even, for example, Wakarusa, we have mill overlay curb and gutter work that's planned there, but it already has a shared use path facility along the corridor. So I take what the existing condition is, plug it in the matrix tool. If it says that it's already a level of comfort of 1, and it's going to, we're not changing that type of facility, and then it remains a level of comfort of 1. I mean, I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're asking in terms of, the planning with the street maintenance versus whether or not they're existing or future bikeway facilities.
Well, I guess my question is, was it on the bike plan always, was the plan always to have these be sharrows? I can't really tell in looking at the bike plan, or are these modifications to the bike plan?
Getting clear whether the facility's already been predetermined. And the answer is no.
Yeah, the answer would be no. Thank you.
Okay.
That's where our role and staff come into play.
Mm-hmm.
The matrix tells them what's available.
So, Stephen, I'm curious, as far as signage to make motorists aware of bikes, to make it feel safer for a cyclist, what other options exist besides the sharrows that you know to be effective, that serve that same purpose?
Besides like a bike route signage?
Like share the road. I mean, are there, what other stuff has worked well?
David?
Well, we have some signage on bike routes. I don't know how it's quantifiable, like works well. It's probably just subjective to how you feel comfortable on the street. So I don't know if we have any data to say, well, this has worked well or not worked well. Mm-hmm. But we've, over time, we've built some of the bike network through street maintenance to make these improvements that are just, they're temporary in nature, that if there's ever a bigger, larger project that improves the street, we would upgrade the facility to something that's better than just like sharrows or signage, but that would take a lot of time and money to do that. So, I think through the bike plan, we do get feedback from the community and surveys about, what they want to see. And I know that sharrows aren't really very popular, but it's, what we've heard in the past is that it's better than not doing anything. So we'll be revisiting the bike plan next year with the MPO. It'll be revised, so that conversation I'm sure will continue.
Okay. And I see the traffic count. Is that taken with one of those devices that goes across the street and cars run over it? And how do you get that?
It's either I utilize both like counts, past city counts, or KDOT provided city counts, and there's a map that's available through the website on like prior traffic counts that are actually been taken by the state, and on ones that we have, and I do that comparison when including it in the table and essentially in the matrix tool, and try to make those determinations. If I got one residential street that's showing 500 vehicle counts, the assumption could be that it's going to be of similar types of counts that are adjacent to it. So, and typically less than 1,500 is one of those threshold counts on there, and you can see that in the table. That's what I utilized. Because the assumption at that point is that on this particular residential street, that's adjoining, another one is like at 700 or less. So I use that less than 1,500 and try to make the best determination with that. But yes, counts would be like either like automatic type of detection or, physical counts made by a person, making counts at an intersection stuff. And I think there's even other methods off of cameras.
Yeah, we've got new
as well,
cameras
so.
that take counts.
I can't help but think that, I've heard in urban planning sometimes, like, if you want to know where to put the sidewalk, just look where people are already walking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
the
just pave
trails,
it.
yeah.
Right? So I wonder, as far as making a bike path or prioritizing a certain place for bikes, do we have a way to know what roads are being used frequently by cyclists already? Just because it's kind of like the thing that makes sense for a cyclist to use, Because we have counts of cars, is there a way to gather information to know how many bikes are using that particular road?
When the Metropolitan Planning Organization does its bike planning every 5 years, they'll bring data like that, help gauge like where the demand for, bikeways exists.
Cool.
And every time it gets better and better.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a 5-year cycle.
Yeah.
And if we look back 15 years, we've gotten light years ahead. So I'm excited that we're going to see that plan get updated next year. I don't know if they've got, better data, but I'm assuming like everything they do, it just gets better. So.
We're looking at getting a subscription to, I don't know what vendor we would use, but it's called like Big Data, where you can they use people's cell phone data, and basically it won't give you a number, a specific number like, oh, there's 432 bikes on this road, but it'll give you like a heat map, right? So it'll give you a general indication of volumes for vehicles, bicyclists, pedestrians, like heat map type things, and then we've been using that in our models. So, and I think some of that kind of drives into like for the bike plan, what the routes are, and obviously we get public comment as well. So we'll be going through that exercise with the revision of the bike plan next year. So if it's, we have conversations on whether the bike routes, for instance, on Elm versus Locust, those are things that we would have the conversation with the bike plan.
Strava publishes a heat map that shows where people are riding that use that app to track their rides. And yeah, a lot of that data, the MPO brings it to their planning work every time they do it. So.
You just gave me the #1 reason to sign up for Strava. That was it.
Well,
I needed that.
I mean, that's just one vendor, but I think the MPO, that process, if you haven't been part of it, typically the MPO will seek representation from this commission to be on their plans or planning work. So if you're interested, that would be a great way to learn more about their work. But they do the whole county. So they'll spend plenty of effort on Lawrence, but.
Well, the bike plan's specific to Lawrence now.
Oh, okay.
It's the Lawrence bike plan. So there's a county bike plan as well. It got updated last year or this year.
So the one next year will just be the Lawrence?
The Lawrence, yeah, Lawrence bikes plan, yeah.
Great.
There are automated bike and ped count devices that some other cities use. I've seen them on like the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. They do have, I don't know the mechanics of them, but they are available.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I think we're still back to that main question of what to do about sharers versus speed. I feel like we have a couple of options here. The one is just, say, yeah, we can do these on 25 mile an hour and 30 mile an hour streets. The other one is just don't do them at all. And honestly, the more articles I'm kind of trawling through here on Google, it's not looking good for sharers, guys. It's like a lot of studies have said not only are they possibly useless, but they might actually be worse in some cases because people don't know how to use them. And it makes it more dangerous for riders.
Well,
So,
except that I just pulled up one, it's from bicycling earlier this year. It just says, use them in the right, in the right circumstances. And, and then this one, it's, talking about the 30 to 35 mile an hour is still an acceptable, probably the combination of that speed and then lower traffic counts probably make it more desirable than, the 35 plus high counts. So, I mean, 7th Street is a route that, bike groups use to go out of town, both gravel to the gravel routes and also, heading towards Linwood and those kinds of things. So that road is used quite a lot for cyclists, so.
That's why I think it'd be fine to include them if it is on
Yeah.
an identified bike route.
Yeah.
I feel like that.
At least as wayfinding.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If it
right.
wasn't on like an identified route or,
Mm-hmm.
then I'd probably be against it, but.
It also looks like in each case, the level of comfort score goes down, which is a good thing, if the shared lane marking is added. Right, so the goal is 3 and lower.
Okay, down's
and
better.
It looks like from the table you've presented, either stays the same or it gets better by adding the share.
Right.
I mean, there's probably some more to that metric than we can see here. There's probably like, okay, how does it get better, right? Like, what exact metrics feed into this index of level of comfort? And like, how are they objective or subjective? And do we really know anything about it? Or just like, I'll just assume that becomes a 3 versus a 1,
I think it's pretty algorithmic
I hope so.
at this point.
What source is it from? Is it NACTO, MBTCD, Bike for People? Where does this level of comfort come from?
Morning Journey Company.
Hmm?
Yeah, I think that's so they.
Oh, it's
The level of comfort's in our bike plan.
okay.
was,
This is our thing.
Yeah.
But the
But it comes
speed thing
from
comes from our
NAC
policy,
Yeah.
right? Because the NACTO speed's different than our
Right.
policy speed.
Well, in our policy, it's a recommended, when we had the discussion with the bike ped design, if that's what you're talking about, the recommended was 25 and under, which is the same as the preferred NACTO. And that's even, that table is even in our bike plan. So the preferred NACTO level for Sharrows is 25 and under, and I think under 5,000 vehicles per day, where you can use it is 35 and under 10,000 vehicles per day.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, I think that like the streets that are already narrow, that are already low traffic volume, are the most comfortable streets for cyclists to ride on. I think it's probably negligible whether there's Sharrows applied to them or not. I think I would have concerns about, or I do have concerns about putting Sharrows on high volume wide streets because I don't want to encourage cyclists to travel on them, quite frankly.
I mean, in some cases, that's like the best way to get from point A to point B. Like, I feel like one of the big elephants in the room for the bikeway plan is that 6th Street is not on the bikeway plan. You have to go way around to get anywhere you want to go on a destination-rich street because 6th Street itself is not in the bike plan. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're on a bike, sorry, you're kind of second class around here, right? Like you have to go the long way to get to what you want to do. So I feel like the collector streets, though they are less amenable to having Sharrows on them, to do useful stuff on a bike, you do have to use collector streets. As someone who's not really a sport biker, but more of a get to where I gotta go biker, collector streets are very useful to me.
What do you mean that 6th Street's not on? I mean, it's.
It isn't in
The entire blue line here.
No, that part where I used to live. So from basically Pinckney to downtown, all of a sudden it's like, "Rrr," and there's a lot of stuff on that.
Right, because we're directing people to 5th Street.
Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's just, it's one of those things like, oh, so sure would be nice to go the convenient route that everybody else goes, but no, you gotta transfer,
Well,
100 feet north to
give it a little
do this.
time. We're gonna have Wisconsin, this shared use path on 6th Street.
Mhm.
So the vast majority of 6th Street is gonna be pretty good to ride on. People already use they use the sidewalk as it is.
Yeah.
So as you get closer to downtown, you can't use the sidewalk either.
Right. It's nice.
I think Hillary made a good point, and I think would you propose like removing Sharrows from the I guess, the two wide streets. So 19th is 27 feet wide. And
Yeah, I think so, from the list, but Nick brings up a good point about collector streets being really important venues. I just don't think I would feel safe riding on them, and maybe other people do. Riding on these, I'm sorry. I do ride on some collector streets, but these in particular, sorry.
19th Street wasn't proposed for.
There's only 4 streets that have a 30
Yeah,
mile.
19th Street is proposed for putting bike lanes back on it. There's bike lanes on it today. So if on page 3 of the report, there's a table that has all of the streets, the characteristics, the widths. So 19th Street, which is 27 feet wide, has 2 travel lanes and 2 bike lanes, and we milling and overlaying it, or recommending just to put the bike lanes back as they are today.
So really, it's the second row, Dole Drive. That's 30. And in the notes says include marked shared lane.
Because the volume is so low.
Yep.
What's Dole a collector? It's a dead end.
So you got Dole Drive, which is a collector, Lion Street, which is a collector, Elm is a residential, 7th is a collector, 8th is a residential, and 9th is both residential and collector. So all of those streets, the recommendation is to use Sharrows.
Just out of curiosity, what makes Dole Street a dead end, a collector that only goes to residential neighborhoods, but then something like, say, 4th Street or 5th is a residential, but it can easily collect from the entire grid that it's connected to? It seems kind of arbitrary, honestly. Like, why not just make Dole a residential street, make it 25 miles an hour because it's in a neighborhood, and then put Sharrows on it, right?
That urban form, though,
Yeah.
that is a collector street.
I mean, it has to be, but so is it in a grid, right? In a grid, everything's a collector street, technically speaking, right? That's how grids work. So, I mean, if that's the if we're using the dictionary definition, it seems kind of arbitrary. But if it's a speed limit definition, then we can just lower the speed limit, like we probably should here.
I mean, definitely a grid system, what's considered a collector is a whole lot different than what you see on the west side of Lawrence.
Right. But I mean, realistically, if you were driving down Dole Street, I mean, it's got the same general form as everything to the side of it. It's, it's wide, suburban, curvy, doesn't have any streets anywhere near it, no lines whatsoever. I mean, it looks the exact same, right? Except for the places where it gets slightly wider for no good reason. Why not just make it a residential street, slap a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit? It has traffic calming on it already. I don't know. It just seems like we're arbitrary, preventing ourselves from doing stuff that would be maybe a benefit to people living there,
Yeah, the streets are designated through the transportation plan. Dole Drive is a street that connects to an arterial and has local streets connect to it, and it's planned to extend further to the north. So that's why it's a collector street.
So because it's a collector, because we called it that, we can't do anything less than 30 miles an hour on it, essentially? Is that the restriction that being a collector street sets you up for? You just can't go lower than 30-mile-an-hour speed limits on it?
Not without a traffic study.
Yeah.
But as a policy across the whole community, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have any collectors that are 25. And just signing it, necessarily mean you're going to get lower speeds, but yeah, we haven't looked at lowering speed limits on collectors. And yeah. So in the context of this item and the recommendation, it wouldn't change our, whether it's 25 or 30, whether it's a residential or collector with the volumes that are on it and the width of the street, it would be the same recommendation.
Yeah, I guess at 875 traffic counts a day, it's not really collecting that much of anything.
That's pretty low.
It's only 23 feet wide.
Yeah.
Seems like it'd be probably fine for Sharrows, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with Sharrows on each of these.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
So is there a legal reason that we can't do a yield street? Is that prohibited by Kansas state law, by our own engineering design standards? Is there a reason that we can't do that? Because I feel like this would be an interesting opportunity to at least try it as pilot. Like maybe instead of the methyl methacrylate paint, use like the chalk paint that like washes away after 20 days or whatever. See if it works, you know? Like have signs, educate the neighbors like this is gonna be different. And if it sucks, take it away. And then just repaint it like the way you're supposed to in the first place, right? But if it works, like this is our chance. I know we talked about this at a study session pretty recently. The idea of doing a pilot street. Who is it, Boulder or Davis?
It's Boulder.
Boulder, they have like the pilot street. It's got cool stuff on it, right?
It's Folsom. Yeah,
Folsom,
all the
okay.
weird stuff shows up on Folsom. Whole town knows. Yeah.
So I mean, is there a chance we can do it? Do we have any laws that prevent us from doing it? And if not, is there a possibility to at least do it temporarily and just kind of see what happens, right? Because then there could be something else in our arsenal for the NTMP, for street calming in the future, for figuring out what to do with these things that are like a little bit too fast for sharrows, but not really wide enough for anything else. I feel that we're kind of missing the opportunity here by not doing them.
I think it would take a significant community engagement to introduce something like that, and you'd want the neighborhood to understand what you're asking of them and really to be supportive of it. So
I guess given staff resources, that sounds like that's confined to NTMP then, when those channels are actually open, right? Those channels of direct neighborhood engagement.
I think personally, I'd rather try that. I'm not opposed, there's not a law against the yield street, right? So,
That's
or
good.
having advisory bike lanes on the street.
Maybe that's
super
what it is.
narrow. But I
Advisory
think it would
bike
be
lanes?
better to do that on a residential street
I agree.
as part of like a neighborhood traffic calming project versus to do it on a collector street, which it may set up for confusion, and I just have safety concerns about doing that.
And then you'd have to educate a wider group of people too if it's a collector. But if
Yeah.
it's residential's like that street, we'll probably do it.
We've had conversations about shared streets on very low volume streets and whether pedestrians could, be on them and be safe. But I think there's a lot of community engagement that needs to occur. Charlie mentioned about implementing something like that, and there'd be a lot of concerns if we did that without having a.
a few years ago, we looked at that possibility on a safe routes to school route for,
I think
what's the
it's
school?
18th Street.
Yeah, it's a really narrow road and there's not much right of way. Cordley Elementary, I think. And really low volume. It felt like a great option, but I don't remember whatever happened at it. We routed people a different direction, I'm not totally sure.
So
The people were walking in the middle of the street anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, can we just make that
Official.
a little more
Official, yeah.
clear, like that's the appropriate way?
Well, is there a street that would be equivalent to Folsom Street in Boulder that is just kind of designated as let's just throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what happens? And
Kind of
I mean,
does that street get?
Yeah, I don't know anything about this.
oh,
Is
it's
it like commercial?
it's
residential?
wide.
Okay.
Oh, it's really wide.
it'd
It's
be like
the
that?
it's the street that goes right up to CU.
Would be
It's-
like South Mass?
Sixth Street.
Yeah,
That'd be a nice
it
opportunity.
would be as wide as South Mass. Yeah,
I think we should. aim
and probably with approximately the same volume, if I was to just guess. Yeah. And as a resident for 15 years of Boulder, I never got notification of them, oh, hey, we're about to test something. No, it just showed up one day. And you just,
You're just part of the test.
well, you're part of the, and that's the thing. If it's a good idea, you shouldn't need to train everybody on how to use it. It should be intuitive.
That's kind of the Dutch method, like less signs, more intuition, right? Like,
It's good design.
Yeah.
Good design, people will just understand.
if nobody can figure out it wasn't a good design, obviously.
Right, right. And if it screws up and everybody gets angry, like, this is a stupid idea, okay, cool, that was our tester road. But everybody knows it's just the tester road. So maybe step one is just determining which road in the town would be an appropriate tester road. And maybe that's all people need to know. Oh, this is the tester road, so it's fine. Weird things are gonna happen here. So I'm gonna be patient with what happens here. But if it's tested all around town, I could see people getting grumpy.
Well, Dave, it sounds like you might be open to the idea that, like you said, there's no law that prevents it. It's not like one of those things where like the street can only be so narrow because of NFPA or because of a collector street designation. It sounds like this one truly is kind of, it could happen, right? Do we have the kind of paint that could be just temporary? I've heard of this like chalk-based paint or something. And would it be possible to at least try one of these on one of the really low-volume residential streets where shares are proposed, like, say,
Wouldn't there be that temporary
No.
striping tape?
We have temporary tape,
that's a one lane.
but
About 8.
I don't have the ability tonight to make a decision to do that on any of these streets. I think it would be good conversation to continue to have as we go into the bike plan next year, to see if there's community support to do that, and if we can find a street to implement that on, but I can't tell you tonight that one of these is a good candidate for that. And we need to have a lot of community engagement before we did that. So
Okay.
I'd rather focus on getting our neighborhood traffic management program, our efforts getting that back going again, get an application out, which we're going to be talking about next month. But yeah, so I think it's a good thought. I mean, and I'm open to trying things as long as we're doing it in a manner that's very thoughtful and we're considering safety and having good community input and engagement before we do something that's different.
It seems like the NTMP would be the ideal setting to consider something like that, to add that as one of the options in a toolkit, you know, for neighborhoods to look at as a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I want to do stuff now, because there's not really any cost to implement, it would be good to not make sure we don't have another first-generation traffic calming in Old West Lawrence, where it's like, okay, since there wasn't enough communication up front, people freaked out. Like, okay, maybe we do need it, you know, maybe this is just a very engagement-centered city, and we just have to be very careful about doing anything different, 'cause it just blows people's minds. So, yeah, all right.
I think what you raised for me is often we're stuck in this position where we wonder where would be the best place to try something. And I feel like we never get the answer to that.
And when, too. I think we now have the when. We don't know where the where is going to be, because that hasn't happened yet.
I
But
just wonder
that's
how
next.
that could be more systematic. You know, when I think about just looking at pictures of the advisory shoulders and bike lanes, like, I'm thinking of Barker neighborhood, and I think Leonard is one of the streets
Okay.
that really is problematic. They can't add sidewalks because it would really mess up their stormwater drainage.
Yeah.
So then you're thinking, people drive or have to walk on the side of the road anyway.
Sucks.
So,
Yeah.
but then would it work, or would people just keep driving super fast? Because that's what they do on that road.
There's only so fast you can drive. If the lanes indicate you're supposed to drive in the center and somebody's coming up, like, well, I'll have to figure out something. Guess we juke right? You would assume that people would do that, but I don't know.
But you'd really want that neighborhood to feel like they get it, because they're going to be on that road more than anybody. And although they have a lot of cut-through traffic, so.
Yeah. So how do we, I mean, Charlie's got a point, right? Like, how do we initiate these kind of ideas outside of the structure of the NTMP, the bikeway plan, like things that are long and big? And honestly, we're probably going to forget this by the time we get there, right?
Here's where it seems dangerous, because we could sit here around this table and throw all kinds of ideas out there that make sense. And the bike boulevards were one of those ideas years ago. And then we try it on 21st Street. You talk to people now, and they'll tell you that didn't work out. So it's easy to think this might work. And for whatever reason, you know, it doesn't seem like it always works out as we imagine.
Especially if you stick with the first draft and don't change it up 3 or 4 times like they did in Old West Lawrence, right? Like, they changed that one a lot to finally get community
Yeah, that's a
buy-in.
good point.
Like Boulevard, not really. It was like, all right, we'll take away the diverter and that's it, you know? It was still watered down, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't like they went through multiple iterations
Which
of it.
gets back to the need for community engagement. For it to be successful, we've got to be really, maybe more tuned in. But how do you find the places that are willing to be experimental?
Exactly. And I feel like this is getting existential here, but like sometimes what is good for people's safety is annoying for their perceived convenience, right? And nobody's going to voluntarily give up parking spaces, lower their own speed limits, narrow their lanes. Nobody's going to willingly do that. And if we want to make progress on the climate action plan or T 2050, right, there might have to be some things that might be uncomfortable to people. And I know community engagement's important, but like if you ask people what they want, it's not going to be this ever. It's always going to be more roads, more parking. They'll say they want biking, but when it comes down to like the physical thing that changes it, nah. It's
I don't quite agree with you. I think if you have, so I mean, Barker just keeps coming to mind because there was a time when they were really engaged in, they had an AARP doing a project in their neighborhood trying to figure out how to make it more walkable and bikeable. And they just struggled with, they didn't, the city is not handing out money to do all those improvements.
Mhm.
But they worked on developing a plan and, now we have a neighborhood traffic management program
Mhm.
that does have some funds.
yeah.
So now they're not as organized maybe as they were back then, so.
But like it's one neighborhood at a time.
I think
For a year and a half at the stretch, right? Like we're never going to get to all the neighborhoods in town at this rate, right?
No, that's
Which
true.
is why it's like, how can we do these just small things here and there? Like what Steve's been presenting us with the shares, right? Like these are small improvements that we can do all over town. But if we can be more systematic about it, then we can maybe bring more from the system, which is kind of where this is. But like, how can we continually improve, right?
So the question would be, how do we take the annual street maintenance plan and increase the amount of community engagement so that we're not sitting in an ivory tower saying, oh yeah,
Yeah.
North Florence is gonna get a
Yeah.
advisory shoulder on 7th Street.
I mean, or at least the amount of tools in our toolbox. And to increase the amount of tools in our toolbox, that's where the engagement probably comes in. To at least tell people what it could be, right?
So,
But people don't even know what Sharrows are for the most part. I mean, Sean, didn't you say you're kind of new to Sharrows?
Oh, yeah, I'm 3 days in.
And you're a biker who lived in Boulder, so like, if anybody would have known.
so maybe
right?
the good news is, thanks to the great work of staff, we now see potentially what's available, not just next year, but 4 more years out. So we talk about community engagement, you gotta really get ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe now, we could take some time to look at the 25, 26 years and
I like
think
that.
about how do we get ahead of that, let that neighborhood know. Like North Lawrence looks like it's gonna get work for the next couple years, when I'm turning the layers off here. So 7th Street's queued up for next year, but then, is there another street that might make sense for a more creative solution?
Yes.
It's not in 2024's plan, but is in 25 or 26 or 27?
I think that's the right idea.
I know this is the first effort to do it and it could change, but at least it gives you a way to say, did you know?
Yeah.
In 3 years, your neighborhood is going to have some street maintenance,
Yeah.
potentially, and maybe we're going to talk about that now.
I think it's a really good plan. Like, do what we can with the tools we have now. Don't try to develop tools on the fly to deal with stuff that is a clear and present need. But now that we have the five-year plan, let's get a study session on the books and sit down and really do what we're doing now, but without having Steve have to wait for us to debate existential issues on traffic calming and bike lanes. So I think that's a really good idea, and I would like to put that as a study session coming up soon because now we have this, which is great. And now we've kind of broken the ice a little bit of like, what do we want to see, right? Do we want to see shares? Can we do better? Can we do yield streets? Well, community engagement is needed to make our plan all work. So,
I kind of wonder,
Yeah.
Steve, this is a question for you. So when you're doing what I heard earlier is the aspiration is to have a 70 PCI, but to do that would take a lot more funding. So you're obviously making some choices around where to invest in the street maintenance. Is there a way to use that with a sort of neighborhood traffic management perspective, where you're thinking of this entire neighborhood is going to get kind of addressed in one particular year or maybe over 2 years, so they can be kind of integrated into our community engagement strategy?
I would think just in general terms, big picture, we're looking at it as being a future collaborative type of tool where we can incorporate and overlap, say like I was talking before about corridors and doing, if we have sanitary sewer or, storm sewer, things, water line rehab, and start looking at where these things start to truly overlap and have these future plans to address all these type of items, which might be, transit facilities or, bikeway facilities, to come and collaborate with these various projects and, come into one thing and go in there, impact the area once, get it all taken care of and move out, a corridor concept. So yes, I think this, this is just one of the tools that we could use, as a planning tool in the future to incorporate other items into a project potentially. So, I mean, what you're thinking right now and using it moving forward, that's really the goal of why we're trying to get a 5-year program out there so we can, from other departments or divisions and, commission, groups that we could start making some of those planning goals and try to make that a kind of incorporation.
Well, thanks for getting it out there.
Yeah, it's been ongoing. Yes, I appreciate it as well. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but we've been getting there, just having the time and be able to focus down and trying to get something out there. I mean, it'll be ongoing maintenance with the map and so forth. As years change, priorities change. Collaborative work occurs. So.
I think it's up to us to figure out how to use it correctly. So I think what you're
Yeah.
saying, like, use the advance notice to think about it ahead of time instead of like we're doing right now. So
Well, even like the neighborhood traffic management program, like when you're trying to bring a neighborhood into what I remember hearing was they wanted a lot more data.
yes,
And so, not just data, but the plans, right? So
more
if
ideas.
if people haven't learned about all the planning that goes on in this community,
Yeah.
that'd be a chance to learn it, and then they discover there's street maintenance gonna happen in their neighborhood in the next few years. That's just one more piece of the puzzle.
So I guess what I'm saying is, given the tools we have right now and the lack of the ability to do all this testing and public engagement, all that stuff, whatever you guys want to share us is fine. What I did want to address though real quick, it's another one of those questions of like, are we allowed to do this? On 19th Street, obviously protected bike lane is probably preferred to white stripe. We don't have the room to do that. There's just not enough concrete there, basically. That being said, one of the problems identified with white stripe bike lanes is just like cars drifting across it because they're, like some people I know drive a little bit too far to the right in their lanes. Is there a way to not do a fully protected bike lane, but maybe put bollards or even something as simple as just like those highway rumble strips that tell you when you're going to run off the road and coincide that with the white line? So even if you're not maybe paying super attention, you'll be jolted away very quickly once you hear the rumble strips, like, oh, that was wrong. Just one tiny extra layer of protection for the bikers. And while you're adding the concrete, like, that would be the time, right? Just notch that in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that is a specific tool
No.
that we would be utilizing. I mean, that'd be something that could impact the bike rider as well. You
Yeah,
gotta keep
and
that
the
in mind.
noise.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and the noise, with that. But I mean, in terms of like the tools that we're currently utilizing, it's like a conventional bike lane, a buffered bike lane, where there's a horizontal difference there, or a protected bike lane, which would have a vertical and a horizontal component, but not necessarily. But that would be more like a barrier type, I believe, and that all takes geometric, just width, street to be able to fit these in there and have a minimum lane, and also for the bike rider.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, so it sounds like we can't do that because concerns, but not necessarily laws against doing it. Is that right? Like, it's just not something we've ever done before necessarily?
I don't know if that is defined. I'm looking at the elements that are within our bikeway plan, or the bike plan, the elements that are available for use. And now if there's something proposed in the future, the other elements, like you're saying, like a test or a pilot location, that's something to consider moving forward, see what other elements have been implemented elsewhere and have seemed to work and what have you. But I don't know about anything specific in terms of a bollard or an obstacle that besides, an actual barrier type or ones that have, I guess, seem to be proven, and that's why they're in the, the bike plan and that used as specific tools, when you have the different widths. And when you don't have the widths, do you provide a sharrow, to give some kind of indication, it's like a reminder that this is a share of the road situation, plant the seed, I think, is kind of being described.
So what I think the dream would be kind of like baseline in boulders quite wide. They just recently introduced very, very tall curbs to separate the bike lane from the traffic of the vehicles. So in lieu of a bollard or rumble strips, it's actually like it's a divider, and it looks almost like a parking bumper.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But it's taller, and they're common in Europe. That's where they got the idea.
I think I've seen it in New York too.
They recently installed those. I mean, this has been within the last year on Baseline Road. So, and they had experimented with the tall, plastic, skinny, high-vis
That's what I was thinking too.
dividers originally.
This is a visibility thing at least, right?
They just needed to maintain them too much, because people would accidentally veer off and smack a few. So it just got annoying. So they were like, all right, let's just, this works separating the bike traffic from the main vehicle traffic. So let's put in something like that. So
I've heard here that there was concerns about snow removal, but I think we're getting a tiny this tiny street sweeper. There's something small that either we already got or we're gonna get. It was on a capital improvement plan to be able to clear off shared use paths, but this is way too small for that. It's only 3 feet wide, right? So probably not gonna happen. That's like smaller than a golf cart. I'm trying to find these curbs. Anyway, all right. Well, in that case, we'll just put this on the list then of things to look at that we shouldn't do right now without thoroughly vetting them or piloting. Oh, I feel like for 4 years we've been saying stuff like this. Oh, we really got to look into this. Like, we've got to start getting stuff on standards and plans and, ways to actually implement it so that we don't find ourselves in this situation again where it's like, well, cool tool, can't use it, right?
This is the first time we've had a 5-year street maintenance plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's only the, second year of a traffic or neighborhood traffic management plan. So a lot of things have happened. It just, there's always a lot more that, can be done, but.
You're just feeling impatient.
Yeah.
I like
Can we just do it?
one more meeting, so.
I mean, at this
I look
point,
back in my time and we're making huge progress.
yeah.
But yeah, you have to have a long range view.
So, yeah.
could be time for a road trip. Yeah.
I've been.
I don't mean to keep bringing Boulder up, but it's a similar size population. It's a comparable size town.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go see all the fun stuff there. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess in that case, I'm not hearing any opposition to this as presented, other than ideas for how to proceed going forward. Is that the general consensus here? Okay. Do we have to vote on something?
No, it's just,
Receive.
we provided feedback.
We have received, and we have provided. I think a lot of
More than he wanted, maybe.
well, a lot of it was providing it to ourselves, frankly, because I feel like we need to organize our thoughts and figure out like.
I guess I could ask, so is that a yes, you're
You want to vote?
the,
Oh yeah, we
Well,
probably
that's
should.
good.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any public comment online?
For keeping us honest.
We don't need to vote.
I'm just saying in general.
Quiet night tonight for public comment. Maybe Michael's on vacation in Boulder. Sounds good. Okay. Alrighty. Well, in that case, yeah, I think the direction is to proceed as presented, essentially, and we'll just keep talking about this. So, thank you for the presentation and answering all of our crazy questions.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Okay. That brings us to staff items. Just looking blank, but is there anything spontaneous you got?
Nope.
Okay.
No staff items.
Mission items. Do you want to talk more about climate action plan, or how much more you got? I guess that the draft.
Yeah,
is
just keep your eyes on the next engagement opportunities. Jamie is really open if anyone's interested in like going to those and talking mobility with people at those meetings. She'd be really on board with someone doing that. So.
Cool. Land Development Code Steering Committee update. big news, things are happening. So the updated draft of Module 1 has been re-released. That's the one with all the districts and uses. But more importantly, the first draft of Module 2 has been released, and that is like development standards. So things like parking, buffer yards, subdivision standards, landscaping, trees, floodplains, like all the juicy stuff that's not quite as wonky as zoning code things. So for our purposes, there's a whole article on mobility and accessibility, which tends to be about how one moves about the site, which is its car, its bike, its wheelchair, all sorts of stuff. So the other one is parking. The big change is that there are no longer going to be minimum parking requirements anywhere. That's the proposal. We'll see how it goes. The way the consultant proposed it was that we were going to take away minimum parking requirements on commercial, mixed use, and industrial properties, but add a maximum instead, which is pretty radical. And then for residential, it was just to lower the minimum parking requirements, but keep some. So Brad Fingeldie recommended that we just get rid of all minimums and just kind of see what happens, right? Like come out swinging, see what the response is, and backtrack if we have to, but see if people care as much as we assume they do. So, and they probably will. But that one's going to be pretty interesting. So a lot for a transportation commissioner to look at and digest if you got a boring weekend coming up. It's going to be posted online soon. I feel like I saw there are invitations to upcoming events like coffee breaks and presentations and open houses. It's kind of an interesting variety of meetings. So hopefully you'll be able to go to at least one of those. The next steering committee one's on Thursday, and I think we're going to dig a lot deeper into Module 2. But generally, I think things are going well. So, yeah. Any questions about code stuff? All right.
Real quick, Nick, I think that Module 2 you can comment on now. Do you know if you can go back and comment on Module 1 at all, or no?
I haven't looked at the site, actually. So it's possible that they just released it all at once. And if that's the case, then Module 1 is in that document. So they kind of just smushed it all together. Unless you've been following it really, really closely, it'd be hard to tell which articles are 1 and which ones are 2. They kind of just flow together.
Okay, thanks.
So as it stands, it looks like all the Module 1 things are in here still. Article 3, 4, 5. Okay, yep. So everything is still in there. Now, the interesting thing is if you, the way the consultant was saying they were going to incorporate comments, it was unclear at first. Either that or I just wasn't listening very well. I assume what was going to happen is that they were going to take uncontroversial ones and just implement them, the questions asked. But things that required a little bit of a discussion, they were going to bring back to us and we were going to go over them. It turns out what they're actually doing is collecting all the comments and just kind of keeping them close. And until all 3 modules have been released and discussed up front, because they all connect quite a bit, then they're not going to incorporate any of the stuff that we've talked about or left a comment on. So if you see something that you commented on that was uncontroversial that somehow didn't get incorporated, that's why. Because it's possible that once Module 3 comes out, which is the processes, then maybe we'll need to tweak Module 1 all over again, and that comment could be obsolete. So that's why they're not doing anything just yet, which to me makes sense. Like, for example, if you are allowed to build a duplex on a currently single-family lot by right, then there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on what that looks like. Whereas if you're only allowed to do it with special use permit and a long drawn-out process and appeals and all that jazz, maybe people don't really care about it because it's going to be so hard to make that happen that the dimensional standards don't really matter. It's a moot point, right? So I think that's what the consultant and the planning department is waiting to see. Like, what interesting effects are we going to see of the subsequent modules and how they affect earlier ones before we start adding comments? Because otherwise we might have to do it twice. So hopefully that made sense. Because it took me a while to understand it as well. But yeah, I was frustrated when I went through. I was like, I clearly, this is a very obvious comment, and I had to talk to Jeff Crick, the planning director, to actually sort me out and be like, no, it all makes sense in due time. So
You won't see revisions until the whole package, basically.
pretty much, and until the final full draft is released to whoever. So that's like May, I think? April? Yeah. Apparently they're actually ahead of schedule by like a couple of weeks. So good news. Okay, well that's it for development code. Bicycle wayfinding plan.
I was out of town, so Hillary, were you able to go?
Yeah, I was there. They decided on the preferred concept plan, which was new fashioned at the last meeting. Pat, I think you showed it on the screen. I can show it if you want me to. Share screen. Would that be helpful?
Can we? Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Quick and easy.
Yeah.
Is that enabled right now on Zoom? Let's find out. There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah, so this was, there was new fashioned, and then it got the most votes, and then Vibrant Lawrence. So they went with the new fashioned, which is, I believe when we last, like I said, last met and talked about this, I think that we all thought this was that we liked this better. Was that what you guys remember, or not? Yeah. So they're going to use the city's emblem and continue, with the blue theme. We had talked about whether to have different colors on different signs. Like, for example, the Greenway, should it be green? And the consensus was that it should remain blue throughout, and that different colors might confuse users. So that is the update from this last meeting.
Was there a discussion, I think there was supposed to be discussion about kind of hierarchy of destinations. Did that come up in the meeting?
Yeah, so I don't think it was on, well, yeah, okay, here. So there was it's a radii, right, between a first, second, or third destination. And they put together this matrix of destinations like KU, the library. They might be on this list here, if I can go down. Yeah, so like Rock Chalk Park, all these that are within these primary first sort of, I don't know, whatever. Sorry, I don't know how to articulating this very well. The primary destination, that's all I need to say. And then secondary that should be within that sort of radii that I've also described of parks, rec centers, Memorial Hospital here, and nature preserves. And then they had tertiary as well, which were sort of minor parks. So the idea was that they were going to mark based on kind of that hierarchy of destinations.
What about destinations like leaving town? Like we talked about 7th Street? Like would that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Counter to the goal, or?
That didn't come up, but it's a really good point. I think I should take that back because we talked about what are common destinations, but I do think I know a lot of gravel riders who do leave town to go access, rural areas to ride. Yeah, that's a great idea, Charlie. Thanks. I'll take that back.
I think it goes with, Sean, you had mentioned, are there signs that you could also put out besides the sheriff's? And if people are leaving town on 7th Street, let's put the signs out there too. It's going to take you 5 minutes to get to the edge of town. Or if you're trying to go to some other destination in the rural part of the community, how long will it take you to get there on your bike?
Yep. So, and just so I think you guys are all aware, there's not funding available right now to actually build the signs and put them up. It's effectively right now, it's making a plan for when there is available funding, how would this be implemented and what would it look like?
Yeah, I would add, as part of the scope for the consultant, they're going to design up to 30 signs on a route. And I missed the last meeting, but I talked with them today, and I believe that the committee discussed using the Naismith Valley Park route from the Lawrence Loop up to campus so they're going to design they don't know how many signs that would take, but around 30, at least provide the designs, like this is the information, this is where they would be at, and then we're going to try to find some funding internally. Hopefully I can find some money to install the signs,
Oh, great.
hopefully next year. But that's that route, just to see how it would look, that's what they're working on, and then they'll take that back to the Wayfinding Committee, I think at the next meeting.
So I see that there's 1,000, oh, it's on the unfunded list. I just answered my question. Yeah, so there is money, but it's unfunded for next year.
But once there's a plan,
At least we'll know how much it costs. Nice. Okay. That makes
All right,
sense.
can stop video.
All right. But don't go too far because you're on for the next one too, which is Vision Zero. Has there been any movement on that?
No, but I ran into Jessica at the open house on the multimodal improvement open house on Mass Street, and she said that in the next couple of weeks she was going to be scheduling a meeting. Dave, you might know more, but I think it's coming shortly.
It's coming shortly. Yeah, I don't think there's a date set yet, but yeah, we have the RFP out for consultant to help, and I think those are being evaluated now. So.
Cool. And Lawrence Loop, we're going to skip that one because Commissioner Reza's not.
Jake's got an update.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the update is that Thursday evening is the first steering committee meeting.
Thursday, like this Thursday?
This Thursday.
That's exciting. Cool. And that'd be with the steering committee before the consultancy, right? Because you said the RFP is out currently to find a consultant, or?
Pardon me?
We have a consultant.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you say about an RFP?
That was for the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan.
Oh, that's what we're talking about. What's on
No,
Thursday?
we're talking about the Lawrence Loop.
Oh, okay, for that one. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm confused.
We've got a lot of steering committees.
Yeah. And there isn't even a steering committee for the 14th and 23rd on Mass Street redesign, but that is currently underway because there was that open house recently. What is the, I guess, status of that? What are we going to see next? What's the sort of short-range plan there?
Yeah, so that was a very well-attended public meeting. I think we had about 75 folks is what I heard. Had a lot of great comments, good discussion. It was just the first meeting where we're just getting input from the neighbors on what they see in the corridor, and the next steps, the consultants looking at traffic volumes, capacity, also just taking the comments into account to see what, different possible options are feasible for the corridor. And then there will be another meeting. I don't think that date has been set, but so yeah, it was, and I know I saw several of you at the meeting, so I think it went really well and got a lot of good feedback. So.
Did you get a general feeling of what people are thinking about the idea of road diet? Or kind of too early to tell?
It's too early to tell.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Like, coming around to the idea?
No, I think there's definitely some folks that are open to the idea. I mean, we're talking about the Barker AARP study. That was a component of that study to look at the street and that possibility of lane reconfiguration is what we're calling it instead of a road diet. But
it's nice to hear that's still got legs. They did
yeah,
that
someone actually even brought a copy to the meeting.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
It was 2015 or 14. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a while, but
Great.
yep.
Well, I think that covers all.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay. Oh, I was just gonna back up. What Dave was saying is, like, I asked the guy from Trek, like, oh, is there gonna be a road diet? He said, we don't use that. I'm not afraid. It's
Yeah.
lane reconfiguration.
Fair enough.
I'd like to just add into this section of our agenda, Commissioner Reza his attendance seems to be maybe getting to the level where he's considered an involuntary resignation. The bylaws stipulate that if you miss 6 meetings in a year, in a calendar year, then that's considered an involuntary resignation. If there are 4 unexcused absences, that's also considered
Oh, I see.
involuntary resignation. And the requirement for an excused absence is to notify the chair 24 hours in advance. Can we maybe just ask staff to check on his status, and if he's getting close, make sure he knows that he's getting precariously close to being involuntarily resigned?
We can do that, yeah.
Thank you.
He did provide us a notice today, but he may or may not make it due to a last-minute
Even
thing,
notice,
but-
though, it's like the
Yeah.
rule still stipulates.
Understand.
So,
Yep. We're also in a position where we're at 8 members now, and I think my understanding is we're not filling positions on boards until the committee on boards structures, until that gets decided, whenever that may be. It'll not be this year, it'll be next year.
I thought that went
So I
to the
don't know.
city commission for comment of some sort. Was that not an approval? Is it just like?
I don't
work
think
as-
it's been approved yet.
Okay. Yeah, because then
But-
everything's different.
Yeah, well, we'll,
so that's.
I'll reach out to Commissioner Reza and make sure he's aware of where his standing.
Yeah, our quorum is 5.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna lose me
Can't fill spots.
if you can't fill a spot.
Hopefully they act quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
how much we can do about that?
Maybe they'll fill the positions, I don't know. I thought it was gonna happen soon,
Yeah.
by the end of the year, but I don't have any update on timing for it, but.
All right. Shall we move on to calendar then? What's on calendar? All right, so our December is pretty much spoken for. Are we, I guess we're probably better positioned to have a retreat this year. So at December, do we need to decide on the retreat committee?
Yeah, we'll have on the regular meeting the 24 calendar
Yeah.
and discussion on having a retreat. And then Evan Corienta will have the draft of the ADA transition plan, so that's the plan for the study session. And then Dustin will be talking about the neighborhood traffic management program revisions on the regular agenda.
Okay.
So that's the plan for December.
Easy enough.
Is there any chance we could get an update from transit?
Yes.
We got a lot going on.
Maybe just an email that you can just talk to us during
Yeah.
staff items even. That's probably more Adam's speed at this
I
point.
know they are Adam's really focused on getting the Central Station open. I think that's planned to be open like by early January, 1st of January. I was in there last week, took a tour. It's coming along. It's going to be a great facility. I think he's looking at continuing the fare free next year as a possibility, and they're still getting data on how that's been going this year. He mentioned that they're getting the third quarter usage data, or the data for how many users for the transit. So I can get with him and get an update.
I'm also curious how the
Soon,
Sunday, I forgot what they're calling it, but basically the way they changed maybe it's micro transit, but you can request a ride now a little differently than what it was, and
Transit on demand, I think.
transit on demand. Yeah, they've done so much this year, it just feels like some point this year it'd be good to get a briefing from them about it. And if the direction that we're headed with the consolidation or changing of the committee structure is going to be kind of putting transit and multimodal together, why delay it? Come and talk to us.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him. I know the downtown transfer station location public engagement's going to be kicking off early next year. So it might be a good time for him to come give an update on all that work that's been done and upcoming.
I'm sort of anticipating at this point that the way things are moving, that the board merging will probably happen very close to the time that we start tackling the location and like shape and size of the downtown transfer center, which would be cool because I feel like that is an MMTC thing too, because it affects parking and driving and biking and walking. So might be a good first test to see how it all works together. But we'll see when that happens. Okay, so we're probably set for December then. Just looking ahead, January is when we elect chair and vice chair and decide further stuff in the retreat, I guess. And just use one of these study sessions that we have in the queue. So should be good for January too. Would retreat be in February or January or either, and we got to decide it?
Yeah, I think in the past we had done it in February and/or March. It'd take a little time to put that together. So if we decide on doing that, that would probably be what we shoot for.
All right, sounds good. I don't have anything else. Anybody have any closing thoughts? Good? All right. Everybody wants to adjourn, raise your hand. Who knows it's a vote or not, but we'll do it different every time. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Plug the wrong thing.